Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on our cabinet meeting. I've got a few things to run through first, and we're getting into the agenda. First of all, where this meeting's online, I need to read out our housekeeping notice, which says, in order to ensure the meeting is managed effectively, please could everyone present follow these ground rules for speaking. Only speak when invited to by myself as chairman. State your name before you speak if you have not been introduced by name. Some people may dial into the meeting and have the benefit of a visual. Mute your microphone when you are not talking. If you would like to speak, please use the raise your hand function in Teams. If there are any recommendations moved that require a formal vote, these will be carried out by myself as chairman, asking for a response of for or against from each councillor on the cabinet, or moving forward on a unopposed basis. Okay, thank you very much for that. We now move formally into the agenda, and item 1 is apologies. I haven't received no apologies, so unless anybody from Democratic would like to say otherwise, I'll move on to item 2, declarations of interest. I have received no declarations of interest, but would any member like to raise any interest now? I'm not seeing anybody raise, so I'll move on to item number 3, the confirmation of minutes. I'm very happy to propose this, and I look to Councillor Broadhead to second these minutes. I'm not intending to run through them. We've all had them in advance. So if there are any points of exception, please let me know. Councillor Broadhead, are you okay to second the minutes?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Happy to second the minutes. Okay,
thank you. I've seen no member raising, so if there are no objections, I will move that as unanimously agreed. Thank you very much. Okay, so item 4, public issues. Item 4, public issues. Okay, so in order to ensure public issues can still be addressed whilst these meetings are being held under the COVID-19 local authority meeting regulations, all public questions, statements, petitions will, whenever possible, be circulated to the Cabinet prior to the meeting, and responses to questions will be published on the Council website and referred to at this meeting. I can confirm that we have received 5 public questions from the following members of the public. Gerald Wriggler in relation to agenda item 14, BCP Parking Standards SPD, Supplementary Planning Document. Conor O'Luby in relation to agenda item 7, Wessex Fields Site Development Update. Susan Chapman in relation to item 13, Climate Action Annual Report, and agenda item 7, Wessex Fields Site Development Update. Elizabeth Elwick in relation to agenda item 13, Climate Action Annual Report, and Anita Rose again in relation to agenda item 13, the Climate Action Annual Report. I can also confirm that we have received no public statements or petitions relating to items of business on the agenda on this occasion. Okay, so we will move to agenda item 5, recommendations of the Overview and Scrutiny Board to present any recommendations not otherwise on the agenda. So I'll ask Councillor Stephen Bartlett if there are any recommendations not otherwise on the agenda. If otherwise, we'll move forward and bring the Chairman of Overview and Scrutiny, Stephen Bartlett, in on every agenda item where there is one. So, Councillor Bartlett, is there anything you'd like to bring on agenda item 5?
There's nothing else. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. So moving on to substantive business, we've got the agenda item 6, the housing development scheme at Cynthia House. I believe Councillor Bob Lawton is proposing this report. Bob.
Thank you, Chairman. The approval of this building at the old Cynthia House site. This brings forward the recommendations of the award of a new contract for Cynthia House, which is no longer fit for purpose. It was a sheltered housing scheme, but now it needs to be demolished. And what we will proposing to build on the site is 10 3-bed houses and 12 1- and 2-bed flats. The recommendations are approve a scheme for 4.5 million to redevelop Cynthia House to provide 22 new homes. Approves a financing of the scheme, including just over 3 million for prudential borrowing, just over 1 million of right to buy receipts, and 428,000 of capital receipts from the shared ownership elements of the scheme, and approve the award to the construction of the contract to the preferred bidder. This is an excellent scheme, building on a building which was built in the 60s, is now a bit derelict. We were finding it difficult to house people in it. The people who are in there under the sheltered housing scheme are being relocated across Poole in other more appropriate housing schemes, and I recommend it for approval by the Cabinet.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lawton. Councillor Mayhanes.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm very happy to second this item. This was a project that had started off in the legacy Borough of Poole Council, and a lot of work had actually gone on to actually move the people that were living in a building or in a block of flats, which, as Councillor Lawton has actually pointed out, was no longer fit for purpose. So it's kind of a bit of a silver lining in the sense that the people that were there were reluctant to move on, but because of the pending development that was going to happen to the site, they were willing to actually move on, and they are now, as a result, in much better housing provision. So very, very happy to see this come forward and very happy to second it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thanks, May. I've got Councillor Rampton. Cam Rampton, hi.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just want to endorse everything that my colleagues have said. I was a portfolio holder for housing in the preceding Poole Council when this idea was being developed, and I visited the property when it was in its bedsit form, and it really wasn't fit for purpose. So I'm absolutely delighted that we're going to be housing families and flats. And it's going to enhance the area for local residents. It's going to be far, far nicer than what we had there before, and help with our housing needs. So I'm absolutely thrilled that this has come forward.
Thank you both. I don't see any other member raising, so we haven't got anybody who's requested to speak on this item. So I propose to. I'm not seeing any disagreement in the chat bar, so I propose to take this forward as a unanimous recommendation, unless I hear otherwise. So please raise now if you would like to speak. No, I don't have anybody raising, so very happy to take that forward as unanimous. Thank you very much for bringing that forward, Bob. And we will move on to item number 7, which is the Wessexfield site development update. Councillor Broadhead, Phil.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I'm delighted to bring this item forward. We did take this through to the Overview and Scrutiny Board as well, and we had a long and fruitful discussion with members of the Overview and Scrutiny Board, so I would thank them for their input as well. The summary is in the report, so I won't give a full blow by blow, but one of the reasons that I'm particularly excited to be here on this is that a number of us have been involved in this scheme for a number of years. This is the site Wessexfields, which is next to what was the Royal Bournemouth and Christchurch Hospital, which we purchased a number of years ago with this very aspiration, which was to bring forward something quite special, a science and meditech park, if possible, to unlock that site for a number of jobs, and also to use it as a bit of a springboard for this growing industry that we've got moving into the future. So a number of years ago, we bought the site. We passed through the planning permission to unlock the site by having roads going to it. And unfortunately, since then, we've been left with a road that hasn't actually gone anywhere. I'm really pleased that one of the first major decisions of this administration is to now bring this forward through to fruition. And the way that we did that, as one of the first things we did when we came back in, was to sit down with our partners, what is now the University Hospitals Dorset NHS Foundation Trust and Bournemouth University, and really just agree how we could make that vision a reality. And the final decision on that and the approval is within this paper. And broadly speaking, what we're looking to do to try and get this off the ground is to sell part of the site to the University Hospitals Dorset NHS Foundation Trust. They are in receipt of some capital monies as a result of that elevation to this higher status, and they've got a very close working relationship as we have with Bournemouth University. So the idea is to sell them a little bit of that land so they can really get on, use that money to deliver this very first part of the Meditech Science Park, and then from there on to work in very close collaboration with them to bring this vision to a reality in relationship with them. We've got a memorandum of understanding that we signed a number of years ago, and I think we've got a collective shared vision for how to bring this forward in the future. So I'm really pleased that the road that currently is going to nowhere is rapidly going to somewhere, and actually somewhere very exciting. There's still a lot of work to do, but this is really the end of the beginning, and the real work starts now on actually bringing this forward. Within the paper, it talks about how we're going to progress the vision going forward. And as I mentioned, the main decision within this paper is to sell part of the site to the hospital. From there on in, we are going to look at the shared vision that we've had for a number of years and develop that forward in partnership. So very much use the Meditech Research Centre as a springboard for a wider science and research park, bringing in commercial uses, bringing in the high-tech industries that we have, but also to look at the possibility of some key worker housing on the site, which is very necessary for our growing hospital. But also, when we look at the sustainability agenda, we always had sustainable travel at the heart of this scheme, and to use it as a way that was very easy to get to, with cycling and buses and things like that. If we get people living on the site as well, particularly those that are working mainly at the hospital, that helps even more. The idea is that will be car free, so that we can really make the most of the climate change agenda here as well. So I'm excited to bring this forward. I think there's a lot of work to do, but we've got great partners, and I'm very pleased that we are now actually getting somewhere on this. Chair, the three recommendations before Cabinet are recommendation A, which is about agreeing the principle to actually to take it forward. Option B, which is to progress the negotiations with our partners in detailed terms for the disposal of the site, and option C, which is to allocate some budget to try and expedite this process going forward. So very happy to be here at last, and I would seek a seconder. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phil. That's great, and I'm personally very happy to second that myself. When we took this administration forward, we were really committed to actually trying to unlock some of the impasse on a number of projects, and I appreciate you've been able to do that both with the Lansdowne project we brought forward last time, and it's great to see this coming forward so quickly in our our cycle of work. So yeah, very happy to second this. I think one of the main things I'd just like to highlight about it as well, just underlining what you said again about the partnership working, isn't it? How are we going to bring our area forward? Well, it's going to be in partnership with key stakeholders, for a wide range of key stakeholders, and in this instance, it's around the University Hospitals Dorset and the Bournemouth University. So we sat down and got to a solution that was really positive. I was also very pleased to see that this we still retained our control over the rest of the site. So we're able to bring forward the housing and economic driving benefits that we look to throughout this. So other than just to personally congratulate you on bringing this forward at the pace that we would like to, I'm very happy to move forward. Okay, so that item is proposed and seconded. Are there any? I believe Councillor George Farquhar has requested to speak on this item. I'll bring George in now.
Thank you very much, Councillor Miller. Yes, no, it's pleasing to see this report come forward. I was part of the consultations with the public and the residents, which took place last year under the previous administration. And what was really pleasing that a lot of these ideas came from the actual residents themselves. My question perhaps is, just for clarity, just in what Councillor Broadhead had to say, is that for the public, can we just be clear on whose responsibility it is to build these 500 key homes, which is referred to in item 14? Because to listening, it seemed a little bit unclear as regards whether or not it was the university's hospitals which are actually going to build these properties, or if it is going to be the council itself.
Thank you very much, Councillor Farquhar. I've also got in this non-cabinet member section, Lawrence Williams requesting to speak, so I'll bring Lawrence in now as well, Phil, and then if you could answer both, that would be great. Councillor Williams, Lawrence.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. And I speak in support of the paper. It's a long time coming. When I was on the Cabinet for Bournemouth Council, we discussed this back in 2016, I think. So this feels like not the final steps, but certainly a step in the right direction. I'm also pleased to hear that Councillor Broadhead mentioned the road to nowhere, because that has really been an issue in my ward. In fact, it was an election promise to build a road through there, and we were very disappointed when last year it became the road to nowhere, and thank goodness that we can now have a road to somewhere. I would encourage you, though, to expedite it as soon as possible. I know funds are limited, but I would ask that you look at doing this as a matter of urgency. Our roads are almost coming to a standstill, particularly Castle Lane, at certain times of the year under normal circumstances. So very grateful for this paper, very grateful to the administration for bringing it forward and for promising the road to nowhere to be the road somewhere. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. And Phil, bring you back in to address those points and questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to both councillors for your support. I'll deal with Councillor Farquhar's question first, which was around the and how we're going to bring that forward. A very good question, as he will note in 14, it does talk about plans, and I think it's always been a long aspiration for this site, particularly as through the clinical services review, the hospitals across Dorset not only have been restructured but also gone up a step in their offering, which is pretty much underlined by the elevation for Royal Bournemouth and Christchurch Hospital to the University Hospitals Dorset. That hospital is growing on site. They have a workforce that is growing, and of course, as that workforce grows, we need to provide adequate accommodation for them. And isn't it just obvious that the synergies are there with a nice parcel of land with some aspirations there to do that in a really sustainable way? We're formulating plans, working closely with them on how we bring that forward. But I think what's become pretty clear is that by selling part of the land here to the hospital so that they can get on with that Meditech science and research lab, that enables the site to be unlocked. We will then retain ownership of the rest of the site, and it's very likely that we will then be looking in collaboration with our partners there to develop that ourselves, or at very least in collaboration. Obviously, those jobs will be going to the hospital, and therefore the need is driven by the hospital, and we're already working very closely with them. But it can and should be something that we should drive predominantly as much as anything, so that we can get on and deliver this at pace. And that was one of the real drivers about, as the leader mentioned, about retaining some element of control over this site, because that means, as Councillor Lawrence Williams said, we want to expedite the process, we want to get on with this, and with the passion and energy and enthusiasm that we have, I'm very confident that we can make that a reality. So it seems very likely that key worker housing will be progressed by ourselves, but as the leader said, in very close collaboration with our key partners there. Moving to Councillor Williams, thank you for your support. I'm really happy that we've been able to do this at such pace. And yes, the plan, as I mentioned, is to really get on and do this. Again, this is the reason for taking it in this slightly staged way, by selling part of the land to the university and the hospital. They can get on and deliver that. We can then get on and work in partnership with them, delivering the rest of the site, hopefully in tandem. And we've already made significant progress with that, as previous cabinet papers have seen. We've got a pathology lab going on site, which is funded by the council. That will be progressing shortly as well. So it's all very much coming together. The road is already there. Now we just need to get on and unlock it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Broadhead. So we now move on to members of the Cabinet Plus who would like to speak on this item. I had Councillor Hazel Allen requesting to speak earlier. Hazel. I notice your hand has gone down, Hazel. So I'll unless you put it back up, I will move on. Would any other councillor wish to address Cabinet on this item? Okay, so we see no disagreement on it. So unless anybody wishes to raise in the chat bar or on screen, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll take this forward as unanimous support. Okay, great. Not seeing any there. So happy to formally accept this as unanimous cabinet support. Thank you, Phil. Okay, that will move us on to item number 8, bereavement services plan. phase 1, and I ask Councillor Mark Anderson to bring this paper forward.
Thank you, Chairman. As a result of the closure of the Pools cremator in April this year and the opening of the Harbourview private cremation facility in 2017 and the possibility of a new cremator opening in New Milton next year, it was considered prudent to review the service and look at the impact of the private sector was having on the market. Currently, there are 8 cremators in the area, and of these, 2 are privately operated. This proposal is a 2-phased approach, and it's covering the period from 2021 to 2026. Phase 1 is the phase we're asking to approve now, and then phase 2 will be reviewed in 18 months' time to see how we're progressing. The main items are that we invest in the pool site to develop a high-end ceremonial and memorial venue, invest in Bournemouth to provide better access to the cremators to allow more flexibility, and we harmonise the IT systems. There are currently, as of 2019, 197,736 registered burials within our 9 cemeteries, and we also have 5 closed parish cemeteries. We currently have 2 separate IT systems in Bournemouth and Poole, while Christchurch burials are still all recorded on paper. Consequences of this are, amongst others, it's difficult to locate grave owners, and it requires a large amount of time and effort to help relatives locate a loved one's grave. It's also worth noting that we'll be investing £80,000 in nitrous oxide abatement equipment. This will add to our mercury abatement system, so helping protect, particularly as a traditional MDF and darkwood veneer coffin will release when burnt the same amount of nitrous oxide as a single 500-mile car journey. The focus will be on the long-term use of the pool site, enhance the location, and will not exclude the installation of a new cremator if the business case requires it. Consultation has also been carried out fairly extensively with the local funeral directors, liaison group, direct meetings with individual funeral directors and the ward councillors who abut the pool site. The Centre for Death and Society and APSI have also reviewed the plans and commented favourably. And finally, we also need to develop additional business burial spaces, as this is critical in both Poole and Christchurch. And we need to continue the maintenance of existing enclosed cemeteries. It's worth noting that we have a legal duty to maintain cemeteries for 75 years after the closure for new burials. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mark. Great, and look for a seconder, please.
That would be myself, Chair, second this item. And just to say a few words on this, having been a Poole resident for many years and unfortunately having attended numerous cremations at Poole Crematorium, I know how important this crematorium is to local people, and I know what a beautiful setting it is. So I'm absolutely delighted that there is a plan to bring forward a business case in 18 months' time, which will include enhancing the Poole Crematorium. And I think that's a really strong message to give to people, that we recognise what a beautiful place it is and how important it is to local people, and that we have a commitment to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. That's great. Councillor Barlow, I believe this was taken to overview scrutiny. I don't see any recommendations, so please show now if you would like to address Cabinet on it. If not, we don't have any non-Cabinet members who've wished to speak. I'm happy to move forward to the Cabinet debate discussion. While I look to see if any other members want to come forward and speak on it, I'll just reiterate my support for this. You know, again, it's an incredibly important site in Poole, in that community, in our town in Poole. So I'm really glad to see there's some investment, going into it, and thank you, Mark, for your leadership in bringing this forward. I don't see any other members wishing to speak, so I have heard no disagreement. So we will look forward to move to a unanimous support, unless I hear otherwise. No, I don't. So thank you very much, Mark. That item has got from Cabinet. Okay, that moves us on to agenda item 9, the Bournemouth Towns Fund update. Councillor Broadhead, Phil.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. This is the Bournemouth Towns Fund update, but it's probably slightly inappropriately named. That's just because that's what government made us call it. But really, it's all about Boscombe. And the idea of this is, as we all know, that the government has launched the Towns Funds to help areas that need a really big capital and cash injection to really regenerate them, take them to the next level. So we've been working closely with government to bring that forward for the Boscombe area, and I'm delighted to say it's going quite well. This paper, quite unusually, is not actually seeking permission to do very much, but actually is just noting the work that has gone on, the fact that we are waiting for an answer, and then to talk a little bit about what the next steps are. So the idea with this is that we put a funding request in for around £25 million, which is actually quite a chunky amount of money, which could make a real transformative difference to this area, which has been a little neglected for quite a long time. We've done a number of things that have really helped to take the area forward, but ultimately it is just tinkering around the edges. So with this amount of money, it could really make a very big difference to take what is a great and a historic area and really unleash its potential and do something about it. So we've been working up plans to lodge with government about what that money would be used for, and predominantly it's looking at the area where the current sovereign centre is, and really thinking differently around what is offered there, bringing more people to live in the area, complete transformation and redevelopment of that Boscombe town centre area, and at the same time really harnessing the work that we've done on the smart place agenda in other areas such as Bournemouth. That's really caught the eye of government as well. So to look at deploying that out as we move forward, convincingly into the 21st century about how do we live and work smarter. That digital connectivity bit is actually a really important bit and a lot of productivity and in and of its own right. So the paper before you gives a little bit of a summary on the work that's gone on to date. I will pay tribute to those that have come before me on this one that has been going on for around 18 months now, and the previous administration done a considerable amount of work on this as well. So I think collectively we're all hoping that the positive vibes that we've been getting from government will bring forward a positive outcome here. So the recommendations are that we note that we actually have already received £1 million to fund some capital projects that can be delivered this year to help to accelerate that Towns Fund process. B, that we're actually deploying the digital connectivity there as well to work in the smart place infrastructure in Bournemouth, a bit like we've done very successfully in Bournemouth. And C, to note the contents of the town investment plan, which has been submitted to MHCLG on the 30th of October. Now, when are we going to hear? I can hear you all asking. Well, we were told that it was due to be by autumn. I don't know whether others have looked outside, but I think we can convincingly say that autumn has passed. We were then hoping for an early Christmas present. I don't think that's going to happen, so you'll just have to be content with my delightful Christmas jumper today as your early Christmas present. Indications are that it's going to be early next year when we hear the final answer on this one, but we remain very optimistic. So a lot of work's gone on, fantastic strategic board on this one, and let's all keep our fingers crossed for a good result. I'll seek a seconder. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phil, and I look to a seconder.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Broadhead. I'm delighted to second this. The amount of money for Boscombe, it's well deserved. It can be put to fantastic use in Boscombe. The size of the amount, 25 million, is of a size where, it's of a size that it must make a difference, and it will make a difference, and that's important. And the only other thing I pick on, just to not repeat what Councillor Broadhead has said, which I fully agree with, is that notice on the 5G there that explicitly it's in there about how the monitoring of the electromagnetic field, the emissions, they will be monitored, and they'll be monitored to sort of recognise standards. And just in case that comes up as a question or that's an ongoing concern, that monitoring will be in place, and I think that's important as well. So I think all the bases have been thought through on this one, and we eagerly await the confirmation of the award. Thank you.
Thank you very much, both. Okay, so that is proposed and seconded. I don't believe this was raised at overview and scrutiny, but again, Councillor Bartlett, please raise if you wish to speak on the item. If not, I would look to see if any other non-cabinet members wish to speak. I don't see any raising. So, oh, sorry, Councillor Farquhar has just raised. So, George, please please bring forward your question.
Thank you, Chair. I think you'll find that Councillor Kelly was ahead of me.
Thanks, George. Councillor Kelly is part of the Cabinet Plus, so I'll bring her. The structure is we bring forward questions from non-Cabinet members first, and then the Cabinet have a debate on the item. So very happy for you to proceed, George.
Understood. Just for clarification for the public, then. So Councillor Kelly is Cabinet Plus, so therefore speaks after ward councillors. Is that correct?
Yes, as has been widely reported, George, you're quite correct.
Thank you very much. I welcome this investment, and it's long overdue, as per the reasons for the recommendations in the paper. It's a little bit. I find it difficult to accept that, you know, terminology such as little neglected and tinkering around the edges, when the reason for the recommendation is that Boscombe continues to be an area of entrenched deprivation under the indices of the Deprivation 2019, despite long-standing actions by multi-agencies to up the area. My question really orientates around the fact that I attended a number of the consultations with the residents and businesses last year, or should I say this year, both prior to COVID restrictions and during it, which was pleasing to see that the previous administration managed to continue that consultation. But one of the concerns which I had was what is termed mission creep, in that obviously investment is coming from the outside, and what we found before with developers is that with mission creep to be viable, then the expectations for affordable housing and the nature of the housing begins to give way to making profits. My concern here is that one of the things which came up in those consultations was that the neighbourhood plan is being questioned. Now, the neighbourhood plan was adopted after a referendum in October 31st, if I recall correctly, of 2019. The neighbourhood plan, and one of the things which was really important to the residents from the neighbourhood plan, was the nature of the properties, which was that as part of this regeneration, that there'll be new properties coming into the equation. And in the plan itself, it actually quite clearly states that. Sorry, excuse me while my hound makes himself comfortable. What was quite clear in the neighbourhood plan is that any development of over what they term 10 units, but in reality these are 10 homes, is that 50% of those homes is to be 3 bedrooms or more, 40% is to be 2 bedrooms or more, and only 10% would be 1 bedroom. Now, many councillors here are aware of the ongoing issues and legacy issues that we've had as regards to the nature of the housing of multiple occupancies, bed sets, etc., that have led to the problems of deprivation in this particular area. My question to the administration is, what steps are they going to make sure that the neighbourhood plan that the residents voted on in a referendum are actually maintained, and they are unassailable, shall we say, by the demands of developers?
Thank you very much, George, and thank you for your dog's appearance too, even more entertaining than Phil's jumper. Councillor Broadhead, would you like to come in before I answer those questions before I bring in the rest of the Cabinet group? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Farquhar for your comments and question. Councillor Farquhar is quite right. This area is an area of entranced deprivation. A number of us have been aware of that for a lot of time and putting a lot of effort in to do something about that. And I think this is the next step in that. So rather than complaining about it, I agree that now is the time to really step up what has already been a considerable amount of work and take it to the next level. Councillor Farquhar is talking about two different things. I think this is the process for taking forward an ask to government for £25 million to do precisely that, to do something transformative for this area. The neighbourhood plan is something that as Councillor Farquhar points out, has been voted upon by the local people, forms a very important part of the planning process going forward, cannot and should not be ignored, and always will be taken into consideration for as long as it's there. And I've seen no moves to try and sideline that by any stretch. But of course, we only actually succeed in taking the area forward, particularly if we get this money, by all pulling together and actually not talking an area down, talking our positivity up, and crucially coming around the table to work on solutions in a joint and non-partisan way. And I look forward to continuing to working with Councillor Farquhar and any other members as we try to actually do something really quite important here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phil. I'll move on to debate with discussion from the rest of the Cabinet members. Have Councillor Jane Kelly next to speak. Jane.
Thank you very much, Leader. Yes, I'm really excited as ward councillor in Boscombe West, of course, and also having spent many years working on the regeneration in Boscombe. I'm so pleased that we've received this forward funding so that we can start these initial projects. It's really exciting because it absolutely demonstrates to residents that we are going to be doing this. We can be confident, optimistic, as Councillor Broadhead put it, that I think we've got good signs from government, and that hopefully we will get this large amount of money, which will in turn bring more investment in so that we can make it an even bigger project with a bigger difference. We have over the last 12 years done an awful lot of work in Boscombe. We majored on the housing situation. We raised the standards of the housing available across Boscombe, particularly in the areas of mostly deprivation, and indeed we are continuing that work in that area by having a wonderful new project called Aspire, where we're going to have really help the communities to come together, and it almost will be part of the Town's Deal Fund work, I think, because everything that we do in Boscombe brings the communities together and helps to enhance the economic vitality in the town. And a lot of what happens with the new housing from the Town's Deal Fund will help that as well. So all in all, I'm very excited about this work and look forward to it starting early in the new year. And of course, also getting the answer from government in, we hope, January, February time. So thank you, Councillor Broadhead, for that.
Thank you very much, Jane. Bring in Councillor Mike Green. Mike.
Thank you very much, Leader. Just got a couple of questions on this, if I may. The first, Councillor Broadhead, you were talking about the regeneration as potentially bringing more people into the area to live there and hopefully to work there as well. Can I just get some sort of assurance that that will be done in a sustainable way, and that we will be looking at the emissions consequences and also the transport consequences of that, to ensure that it is as car free as possible, as you brought up previously, would hope would be the case with Wessex Fields. And while I'm asking, can I ask a wider transport question, which is that it is a very important route going down Christchurch Road at the moment, and just to ask that as anything is developed, just for your assurance that yourself and officers will be involved with transport to ensure that everything knits in together, rather than potentially see transport as a problem to be sorted out at the end. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Mike. Phil, would you like to come in and pass comment on those two comments? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Green for those 2 points, of which I completely agree with. First of all, regarding the growing need for people to where they work, where they spend time. Not only is that the solution to a lot of the problems that all of our town centres and high streets across the whole country face, but also it does help with that climate change and sustainability agenda. We later on in the agenda, we're taking through the supplementary planning document regarding the park standards. And there's some really interesting statistics there. In Bournemouth alone, almost half the people that live in central Bournemouth no longer own a car. I don't have the statistics for Boscombe, but I'd be surprised if they were that different there. So as we move forward, we need to make sure that any development is done not only in a sustainable way in terms of how we build it, but that it really fits in and drives into that long-term evolution for how we live our lives. And I'm actually very confident that will happen here. It's part of a bigger picture as well, as we have and we continue to have pressing housing numbers, not only mandated by government, but also clearly people need to live somewhere. That in an urban area that we're in, bordered by the sea on one side and Greenbelt on the other, that where we have to build homes, we do so in a way that A, fills the need for people, B, fulfills that climate change and sustainability agenda, and C, gives the most bang for the buck, if that makes sense. So I'd much rather build homes in a sustainable way in an area at some scale where people actually want to live, than tinker around the edges, to use the phrase that I used earlier on a housing point of view, and not fulfill that need. So really committed to that, and that is very much part of what the aspirations and plans are for this here. The second point I think is actually a really important point, and that's about the transport, because it's all very well to draw pretty pictures on a page, but of course there are consequences of that, and we've got an excellent team here that are looking at the big picture here. I think one of the things that struck me when we first came back into administration was that the plans were quite advanced and very exciting. I don't think the transportation considerations had been probably quite as high up the agenda as they had been, and I have flagged that up, and I've asked the team to bring in Councillor Green and the team really early on in that process, because this is currently quite a major road. As we've seen before, tinker with important transport routes at your peril. So A, we need to make sure we've got a plan to deal with that, to deal with it in a sustainable, climate change friendly way, but also not to bring the whole area to a massive gridlock just because you put some nice fancy buildings up. I'm really confident we can get there. We're now putting this at the front and centre rather than as an afterthought, and I look forward to working with Councillor Green and others as we take that forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the engagement on that paper. This is for decision, so I'll look to see if any other members wish to speak, and then I'll move to conducting the vote. Okay, I don't see any other members wishing to speak, so if there is no disagreement, I will move to a course unanimous decision, and I see no disagreement, so we'll formally move that forward. Thank you very much for bringing that paper forward. Okay, let's move to item number 10 now, which is housing and property compliance update. Come to Councillor Lawton. Bob.
Thank you, Leader. All councils are obliged to give an annual report on property compliance, i.e. are they safe dwellings. This report provides information on how the council meets its responsibilities in ensuring that all its homes are managed in a way that meets compliance with current health and safety legislation, best practice and regulatory standards to ensure the health and safety of residents. The recommendations are: the Cabinet notes the compliance information provided details of how the Council is performing regarding statutory building compliance, and performances will be reported annually to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. The Council, as a landlord, has many legal obligations. It must satisfy to ensure the health and safety and welfare of its tenants. It must also adhere to the regulatory standards as set out by the regulator for social housing, particularly the home standards. And can I just mention a couple of things, which the main areas in which the council has a legal obligation to ensure the safety of its residents: water quality, gas safety, asbestos, electrical safety, fire safety and lift safety. And just one final point before I seek a seconder. It also highlights the challenging year which we have faced as a BCP Council in dealing with A, how we look after the safety of our residents, and B, handle the COVID emergency. One of the greatest difficulties we've had is gaining access to people's homes to check their gas appliances and especially their electrical appliances. I'm pleased to say that we are now up to date, although some of them were lagging behind, but we did get dispensation from the Health and Safety Executive and standards of how to gain access to people's homes who were obviously, for lots of reasons, reluctant to allow people, strangers, into their house and with the COVID emergency. This is a good report and I recommended it to the Cabinet. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Bob. And I'll look to a seconder, please.
Happy to second, Chair. And I think Councillor Lawton has said what I was going to say, which is it's been an incredibly difficult time for our residents with COVID and people who are shielding, obviously very reluctant for people to come in to do these checks, but essential that they are done and that our residents' welfare is considered. So very, very pleased that everything is up to date and that hopefully moving forward there won't be any issues because we'll all be vaccinated very soon. So happy to second this report, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. Great. I don't believe this was considered by the ONS board, but please again raise if you would like to comment. Councillor Bartlett. Otherwise, I'll move on to non-cabinet member colleagues to ask any questions. Do I have any councillors that wish to speak on this item? I don't. So, do any of our cabinet colleagues wish to speak on this item, or I'll ask Bob to sum up. Bob.
Thank you, Leader, and I'm pleased that the Cabinet have accepted this report. Can I just mention, and my grateful thanks to Shane, who's worked like a Trojan in ensuring that we meet all regulated and ensure that our tenants and our residents are kept in a safe place. And I'd like to personally thank him.
Great, and thank you. We'll add our thanks to that as well, Bob. It's an immense amount of work going on at this time. Okay, I still need to formally effectively move a vote on this. So if there's no disagreement, I will move forward on this item. I'm not seeing any disagreement, so I will take that as a unanimous support. Thank you very much for bringing that paper, Bob. Okay, so we move to item number 11, which is the HWRC policies alignment. Councillor Anderson, Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I go on to speak about the paper, I'd just like to point out there is a slight error in the paper. It's just a minor correction in that in the recommendations at pedestrian access E, the wording says it's referred to in paragraph 6B. It's actually 5B. I'm going to quote and talk about that in a minute, but I just thought I should raise that point. Basically, this is a technical report, really. It's about harmonising of the services across the 3 household waste and recycling centres that we have. And it does some, I think, some quite good ideas as things. Particularly, it allows charities to tip at Millams and Nuffield, which is something we didn't have in Christchurch. So we're bringing Christchurch into the BCP fold on this particularly. The vans, we've picked up on one of the definitions for a car from the Welverley Road site, where we are now allowing dual cab vans to be classified as cars for the purpose of having permits for tipping. And I wanted to particularly just read and quote to you about the pedestrian access. This is something I've had quite a lot of correspondence about from residents, people who want to cycle and people who want to walk to the tips. So we've introduced this as a request of our residents, and it basically says that pedestrians on foot or on a bicycle are allowed to bring waste to the site, but must report at the security gate and provide the appropriate evidence of the BCP residency. Pedestrians must follow the guidance of site staff at all times. Pedestrians cannot bring waste onto the site that they cannot carry themselves and is no larger than a bin bag / rucksack. Pedestrian access is not allowed by residents driving to the site, parking outside the site and then taking their waste in on foot. So it's basically we have a rise in the cycling population as a result of COVID, and it's just to allow people to cycle and be more ecologically friendly to access the tips. So thank you, Chairman. I believe Councillor May Haynes is seconding me.
Thank you very much, Councillor Anderson. Yes, I'll move to Councillor May Haynes. May.
Thank you very much, Chair. I am very pleased to be seconding this, and I particularly welcome the thought that's actually gone into it, particularly in allowing in part of the harmonisation process, that charities are now also able to use the facility at Christchurch. But I think also it shows that we have listened and that we're moving with the times, because we're now allowing pedestrian and cyclists to also be able to access these services. And I think one other bonus actually in harmonising the services here is that residents that actually live on the boundary now have a choice of either going to the one in Poole or the one in Bournemouth or the one in Christchurch, whereas before, if they were on the boundary and say the Bournemouth facility was nearer to them, they couldn't, because they were council taxpayers in Poole and they had to drive all the way to Poole. And I'm hoping that as a result of this, that it may actually reduce instances of fly tipping. We don't know, but I do welcome this harmonisation strategy and very happy to be seconding it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Haynes. Again, I don't believe this is through scrutiny, so I will look to any other Cabinet members, any councillors who want to speak on this item. Councillor Hampton, Karen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Councillor Anderson, I can't see anything in the report, and perhaps I'm missing it. I can't see anything about the use of trailers. Is there anything, any changes to people being permitted to use trailers on a van or a car?
There is an issue with trailers, Councillor Rampton, on the basis that we don't know what size. I have been in discussions with Mr. Portney on this, and we are hoping to come up with a definitive statement on the maximum size. I think it may have been one of your residents has been contacting me about it, and I have been having a discussion with him, and we've given him some advice. It's not in this paper. You're right. It's something that I will do as an addition once we've ratified it.
Thank you.
Okay, great. I don't see anybody else raising to speak, so unless there's any disagreement, I will move forward to the vote and taking it forward as unanimously supported. Yeah, I don't see any disagreement, so happy to accept that paper mark. Thank you very much. And we move on to item 12, which is the Q2 budget monitoring and MTFP update. I'm personally very happy to propose this report. Again, it's a lengthy paper, but we'll all have had the opportunity to look at the detail of, so I'll try and stick to summarising the key points. In terms of the budget monitoring, we've moved forward on some significant priority areas for this council and our new administration, which I'm very pleased to be able to do. I think it's we've been quite consistent in saying our aim is to prove that even in these most challenging of times, we're still in a position to show that political will and leadership that our communities are demanding. I believe it's more important in a crisis to show that than ever. And I'll just take a moment to reflect on some of the priority areas we are bringing forward for additional expenditure in this paper. Firstly, and absolutely most importantly, is children's services. This is the #1 corporate priority of the administration. There's significant work that needs to do, and we're going to back our officers and our portfolio holders in terms of being able to do that work. I'll just take a moment to reflect, this is a priority for not just our administration, but for the council as a whole. And I want to thank, the other group leaders for their commitment to alongside us to this agenda. We are displaying our commitment in terms of, in this paper, a further £310,000 of investment into the improvement plan, and there's significantly more to come in next year's budget. Okay, second item is I'd just like to raise with everybody is our 100 days plan. This is where we see the fruition of that spend, and we've made a commitment quite publicly to raising standards across the board and bringing back pride in terms of making sure our places are cleaner and safer. Today we prove that's not rhetoric but action. We're delivering on our delivering for our communities here. I'll just highlight some of the examples where we are, and you'll see the detail in the report, but we're levelling up street cleansing in Christchurch, which was taken out of the previous administration's budget in June. So really glad that we're able to do that. Should have a significant impact. It's also very important that that's happened now, because a lot of the issues around street cleansing in Christchurch, are at this time of year with leaves and other detritus, which we will be addressing. Other areas, it's significant investment into our town centres, into homelessness, the environment, our economy. I'm particularly pleased to use this investment to start to raise our profile on a national and hopefully international stage regarding submitting a free ports bid. In total, the 100 days plan commitments in this paper total £365,000. Lastly and not least is, and we're going to hear more about this later, but our commitment to transformation and our journey to becoming that modern and leading local authority, which the investment of £600,000 in this paper does through investment in the overall programme and the estate strategy. If I may briefly just move on to the MTFP, we again bring the budget gap down in this paper. There does remain a way to go, but I'm really confident that we'll be in a position to bring forward an ambitious and positive budget for next year, despite the financial challenges in our current MTFP. We expect to receive our update from government tomorrow in terms of the funding settlement, and actually, and I was on a webinar led by the Minister Robert Jenrick yesterday that confirmed that. That would be really important in moving us forward into our 21-22 planning. So I look forward to that. And I'll just highlight the All Members Seminar, the Budget Cafe we're doing for the first time on Friday, which should be an excellent way of all members engaging in the MTFP and budget process for next year. I'll just summarise by saying, these are really difficult times. Our team, led by Adam Richards, and are working incredibly hard and have done all year to address the challenges we and as administration and this authority faces. But we are remaining ambitious, and we are fully in control of the budget and the MTFP. And I'm very happy to be bringing forward priorities and to propose this item. So thank you for sharing me with the length and some of the detail in that. I'll now look forward to finding a seconder. Councillor Broadhead, Phil.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair, and happy to second. You've stolen most of the things that I was going to bring out in this, but I think that one of the things that I would like to underline is that this is just the first phase of the plan, and I'm really pleased with the amount of work we've been able to do in a very short space of time to really get control of the finances. Local authorities across the country are in difficult positions. Most countries across the world are in difficult financial positions because of the global pandemic. But at the same time, this does present an opportunity, coupled with the transformation agenda, to not only make a meaningful difference to the way that we actually run the organisation and do the finances, but to use that for the best benefit of everybody in the area, particularly our businesses at this time. And one of the things that I would like to draw out, as you pointed out, within the 100-day plan, is some of the immediate funds that we're unlocking for some of our immediate priorities. And we've talked about the pride part, making sure immediately that our places feel and look much cleaner and safer, and places that we not only want to be, but we're actually proud of. But also, as we move forward with the dealing head-on the economic challenges that we're facing, to actually bring some money to them and some effort straight away to try and deal with that problem. I'll be talking at much points this week about some of the ways that we're helping businesses through the grants. That is government money that we are able to distribute in the way that we see fit. But of course, we're in control of our own destiny as well. And within this paper, within the 100-day plans, there's a number of ways that we're in a very direct and immediate way helping some of our local businesses and some of our and parts of our economy. What I would say is watch this space. We're in advanced plans now for how we're going to affect that in an even more meaningful way next year. And I'm really pleased that we're bringing all of the members of the council on that journey as well. Only this Friday, we've got a budget cafe where we're devoting 4.5 hours to spending time with members of all political parties to really have some collective ownership around exactly how we're going to meet this challenge. So a couple of things that I would like to bring out, as the leader has pointed, the money that we're immediately putting into our town centres, particularly through with help and support through the local bids, I think is already having a real reaction on. And then something else that we're actually working on at the moment is the development of a free port. We're bringing forward a paper on that shortly. It's something that we're working closely with government on, and that again could be the springboard that we need to unlock a number of really exciting things for our area and put us on the map even more and help our businesses at this crucial time. So this is only phase one, but I'm really pleased to second this and to see immediate priorities come out, get funded, so that we're taking the challenges head on. Thank you. Chair, you're on mute.
Thank you. Getting to 11 o'clock and being the first time I've done that, I'll take it. Fine. Okay. So in terms of next steps, this wasn't looked at by overview and scrutiny, so I'll move on to anybody in the wider membership that may wish to speak on this paper. I have Councillor Farquhar. George.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. Firstly, I'd like to say how pleased I am to hear that the administration and the whole council is backing children's services as our #1 priority. I think that is absolutely essential, and I welcome that fully. It might well be useful for the viewing public to understand and to be reminded at what levels expenditure is signed off, e.g. what can Cabinet approve, what level it is at, and what requires to go before full council. I would welcome you confirming those levels for the viewing public. My second question relates to the 100-day plan and the 365,000 set aside for that. In what way is that going to be measured as being a success, and is that going to be shared with the public as regards perhaps the statistics for the streets which are cleaned and so on and so forth? Because I think it's important for public money that they understand where it's been spent and where it's actually been broken down, and if nothing else, then perhaps to point out where in the financial budgets that can actually be cross-referenced by the public. And the last one then is on free ports. I see that it's been mentioned a number of times here to allow monies for the bid, and the paper was mentioned as coming forward shortly. But do we have a precise date as regards when the paper will be considered by either scrutiny or by Cabinet? So 3 questions, if you please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, George. Firstly, I'll just reiterate what I think I said earlier in my speech, and thank all group leaders, including yourself, in terms of the commitment to improvement in the children's services agenda. So thank you very much for that. In terms of the 100 days plan, this becomes part of a core budget going forward, and this is a long-term commitment. So it'll be monitored in exactly the same way as any other funding and spending commitments are monitored. So we bring forward the budget monitoring and our KPI work as well. So I will look forward to that. I believe there were questions you've answered, so I will move on. Does anybody from Cabinet wish to speak on this item? I've got a number of people, so thank you very much. Councillor Dove, Bobby Dove.
Good morning. Thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I'm very excited by some of the stuff. So I'll just put my camera on. Very excited about some of the stuff that I've heard this morning and read about, and in particular the 100-day plan, which, as I'm looking through the detail of it, is clearly a plan with a 100-year gain. We talk about the high-level stuff, the stuff that people will see immediately. But I think what I'm really excited about is all the quiet provision you've put on in the background to help our residents. So, for example, the work experience scheme, where we are working with private sector organisations directly to help those who can't enter the sphere or the industry of countryside wildlife management, etc. It's usually very cost prohibitive to do so. Of opening it up to those who would come from our socioeconomic and more diverse backgrounds to get that experience, I think is really, really exciting. I'm also really excited by the classroom of the future. I know we've talked about children's services, but I think what I'm really liking about your vision is we are bringing groups of people together to work together, to talk to each other, to open that conversation and that engagement. And with the classroom of the future is a really good example of our wildlife and the Hengistbury Head Rangers working with the Director of Children's Services to look at what we can do for our looked after children and how we can reduce the figures of our neets as they leave our services. I think also not forgetting the environment side. So I'd like to thank you particularly for listening to some of the stuff that that our residents have said, and also the former administration, and to providing, for example, the creation of a woodland along the Stour Valley Trail. extremely exciting. We need pockets of wildlife sanctuaries of varied environments so that we can increase the scope of our natural wildlife and also the diversity that's being offered along that Stour Valley Trail. So yes, there's some big headlines in there, but actually I think the smaller headlines, the ones that perhaps people won't get to hear about, are equally as important. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bobby. That's much appreciated. Councillor Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm very happy to support recommendation B in this report, which is on children's services, and I really do welcome the across the party support we're getting, including in this cabinet meeting. Just to say, this 310k is really about providing additional staff to support our Ofsted improvement plan. There's a lot more detail about this in the report. There is also, coming later on the cabinet agenda, an item on our improvement plan, which is item 20. So there'll be an opportunity for further questions there. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mike, and thanks for the leadership you're showing in the Children's Services agenda. It's appreciated by all of us. Move next to Councillor Anderson. Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to quickly do a bit of self-publicising for the Stour Valley Partnership, who have a second workshop on Thursday from 10 to 11:30, and all councillors are invited. And just picking up the comment from Councillor Dove about the Stour Valley Park. But the other item I did want to pick up on was the fact that we are reintroducing cleansing into Christchurch. In particular, we are arranged through yourself the purchase of a mini road sweeper, which is desperately needed in Christchurch, as it was removed from the budget by the Unity Authority earlier this year, and the state of the roads in Christchurch demonstrate why it's so needed.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mark. May.
Thank you, Chair. I particularly welcome this report, and I know we've put a lot of work into it, and I particularly want to refer to the table that's in paragraph 72. And very, very pleased to see that we've actually put funding into what we consider to be our priorities, which is basically bringing pride back into the town. So the additional support to set up the town team concept, money to invest in a fly tipping pilot, money to invest in more CCTV and antisocial behaviour, all that is most welcome. Particularly, I think with the fly tipping, we've had since I took on this role, just over 2 months ago. Fly tipping is something that has actually featured very, very high on the agenda, with many complaints and emails being received about it. So I'm very pleased that Councillor Anderson and I have actually worked on this together and come up with this pilot, which would hopefully serve our residents and our council well. So I really welcome these extra investments in here. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, May. That's much appreciated. Councillor Green, Nicola.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, colleagues. Sorry, just checking my audio is all right. Firstly, if I might just direct Councillor Farquhar in terms of his questions to the financial delegations at the back of the Constitution. I'm sure Mr. Richards may wish to correct any detail, but broadly, a council decision is at £1 million and cabinet at £500,000, depending on various other issues. But also to just speak, if I may, to paragraph 30. Which recognise the potential pressure to have come forward had the government not funded our intention to and our ambition to provide a winter grant programme for free school meals and other issues. And I'm very pleased to update with members from the time of which this report was written that we are expecting indeed to receive £1.06 million across the conurbation, and that will cover both the free school meal provision, which we've put in for families, and which we're delighted to see very high uptake of, and also covers some of the winter grant funding also for citizens' advice to provide packages of support for winter warmth as well. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Craig. And Councillor Farquhar, thank you very much for your message in the chat bar. Apologies, I forgot to answer your question in terms of the three-port paper. This has been worked on at pace. I saw a draft of it this morning that we've been doing some work on outside of this meeting, and it's on the forward plan now, I believe, which we're looking at later. So it'll be coming to the next Cabinet meeting, which I believe is it the 13th, it's 11th or 13th anyway. So very early in January, if that helps your question. Okay, fine. So I don't see anybody other. Thank you, George. I don't see any other councillors wishing to speak on this item. So I look forward to. Sorry, Councillor Brooks. Nigel.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can I say on behalf of Christchurch, we are much encouraged by the 100-day plan and the first three items of increased cleaning in Christchurch, increased cleaning general manual cleansing, and also gully cleansing. It has made a dramatic improvement, and visually to our residents that attention is being given to these areas which the previous Highway Authority, Dorset County Council, had not really exercised in any degree in Christchurch. This is most welcome. Also in the 100-day plan, on behalf of Christchurch Regeneration, I'm pleased to see that a sum is now allocated to actually progress aspects of regeneration, which I, with Councillor Broadhead, are already discussing as with you also in some more detail. So I welcome the 100-day plan in this respect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brooks. And it's just for me to say, I think, effectively that Christchurch as an area, is an absolute priority of this administration. It's my personal ambition to make sure that all of our boroughs and particularly Christchurch, we can prove the positives of local government reorganisation. I'm well aware there's a long way to go, and you prove things by doing them, not by talking about them. Hopefully, this is a start in terms of what we're doing. And thank you for your work on regeneration in Christchurch, and also the retail strategy you're bringing forward. I've got a lot of work to do, haven't we? But I'm glad we've got a really good team of people looking to do it. OK, I'll bring in Councillor Hazel Allen now. Hazel.
Hi, I'm sorry I lost connection earlier. I just wanted to reiterate some of the things that were mentioned by Councillor Haynes, and just to say that I'm very impressed with a lot of the items in the 100-day plan, particularly with a view to the town centres, around the town teams, and a lot of the enforcement and engagement that's coming forward.
Thank you very much, Hazel, and thank you for the leadership you're showing in homelessness work, which we are all absolutely committed to supporting you in. OK, I don't have any. Thank you very much for the engagement on the paper. I have no other councillors wishing to speak, so I'll now move to the decision-making process. If any councillors have heard no disagreement, so I'll move forward with a unanimous decision unless I hear otherwise. No, I don't see anything there. So very happy to move forward, and thank you very much for your support. Agenda item 13, the Climate Action Annual Report. Councillor Green, Mike.
Thank you very much, Leader. This is a paper which looks both forward and backwards, which is actually quite appropriate as it's been developed across both the previous administration and the current administration. Its contents were warmly welcomed on a cross-party basis at the Overview and Scrutiny meeting, which went into it very deeply, and I'm very grateful for that. The paper reaffirms our twin commitment as a council, both that in 2030 we will be looking to ensure that the council's operations itself are made carbon neutral, and that by 2050 we'll be working with partners to be able to ensure that the BCP area as a whole is carbon neutral. And I think the report shows very clearly where we need to concentrate our work in order to achieve those targets. As far as 2030 is concerned, the report shows that within BCP Council's activities itself, some 60% of those council emissions come from the buildings, and particularly leased buildings, and a further 30% are coming from heating, electricity, and transport. So that's for the BCP Council. And then 2050, so we're looking at BCP area as a whole. 60% of the emissions there are coming from gas use and road transport fuels. I was very pleased, as you'll have seen in the paper yesterday, to be able to announce that we're participating in the e-scooter rental trials that the DFT have permitted, as I think that's going to be at least one small contribution to how we can try to get people out of their cars and onto more sustainable methods of transport which don't have the emission consequences. And I think particularly it shows in that part of the report where we need to work both internally but particularly externally in collaboration with partners if we're really going to make that sort of difference. The report speaks for itself concerning what's being done now, but I would like to point to two specific items which we are bringing forward at pace now, having been delayed, unfortunately, over the course of 2020. The first is the establishment of the Climate Action Leadership Board. Its exact constitution still needs to be discussed, but it's likely that we'll be bringing in business leaders, that we'll be bringing in the universities, the schools, and a number of others who will be able to work with ourselves as council and indeed with national government to be able to pursue that aim, which I believe is realistic. The second is the public engagement survey on our route to a carbon-free BCP area for 2050. And I'm asking Cabinet to agree that we can start tomorrow. I would expect that consultation to last for 8 weeks, or the engagement to last for 8 weeks, after which I would look then to hold an all-member seminar, workshop, to be able to work out how we bring those best into actual targets and actual actions to ensure that we achieve what we want to. I see that she's already asked to speak on the item later, but over the last couple of days I have received representation from the previous portfolio holder, in which I'm delighted to say, and I'm sure she will in a minute, that she's extremely supportive. She also had a few suggestions for minor additions and changes to the public engagement survey, some of which I would very much like to incorporate. Now, given that we want to get this to go ahead from tomorrow morning, although Cabinet members have been emailed those changes, what I think probably the easiest thing to do is that I ask that the recommendation A is slightly amended to read that the survey the engagement questionnaire will go out, subject to minor alterations as authorised by myself as portfolio holder. So if I could ask for that to go forward. Just before closing, I'd like to point out that there were some suggestions from members that when the council's administration changed, that so did the commitment to tackling the climate change emergency. I think some of them had obviously been listening to the Donald Trump playbook when it came to gathering evidence before trying to make accusations. But I very much hope that we won't be hearing any more about backtracking and such like without any shred of evidence. And I hope that this paper absolutely goes to show that as a Conservative administration, we are intent on taking forward the action plan. Our fight against climate change will not stop. I do look forward to working with opposition members in making sure that happens. Thank you, Leader. With that, I'll move the recommendations and ask for a seconder.
Thank you very much, Councillor Green. Thank you, Mike. Do we have a second? I've seen Mark Anderson raising. Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very happy to second this paper. I'm very pleased that we have this paper coming forward. It builds on the work, as Councillor Green has already intimated, that he and I did on the previous Bournemouth administration, where we brought the Green Credentials paper to Cabinet every year, and that very much pushed the climate change agenda in the Bournemouth arena. I'm also very pleased that, not pleased, I'm very exercised by the amount of emissions we have from leased buildings, as Councillor Green has intimated. There's not much more I can say, because I think Councillor Green has been pretty comprehensive on it, covering it here, and where he mentioned it and discussed it in ONS. And we had over an hour discussion in ONS, so I think I will rather leave it now.
Thank you very much. So just to confirm, Councillor Anderson, you're happy to move that as amended? Yeah.
Sorry, Chairman. Yes, I am.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you. And a nice segue, Councillor Anderson. This was at ONS, so I'll just ask the chair of ONS if he wishes to speak on this item. I don't believe there was any recommendation, but I'll just pause for that until I move on to bringing Councillor Rice. Okay, no, I'm not seeing that. So look forward to bringing Councillor Rice. Fizz.
Thank you very much. Yes, I do really welcome this paper, and I am really pleased to see it. I just wanted to explain to the public in terms of how it ended up taking so long to get to this stage. So we were close to consulting on this plan that was originally December last year. We had been planning to consult around March time last year, but then obviously COVID-19 arrived, so the engagement was then due to be released in September. Due to the change in administration, they then wanted to go through it, so it was then delayed until now. So I'm really pleased to see that this is coming out. And I'm pleased that some of my suggestions this week are going to be looked at and considered for next week, so that's much appreciated. I did want to highlight that I specifically asked for a question. This was in there previously, and I have asked again, but it was regarding a question that residents often, it's the first thing they speak about when they think about Bournemouth particularly, but BCP Council. And it is the question of, do the public think it is appropriate for a council, climate and ecological emergency, to continue to host a carbon intensive air show every year? So this highlights some of the issues that we have regarding climate change. Nothing should be taboo. We should be able to ask these questions. Maybe the public do think it is appropriate to continue having an air show at the moment, but it is interesting that we're not able to go out and ask this question and have that discussion. So I would just like to say that to the seafront businesses that have concerns about the impact of the air show and the sort of the educational aspect of climate change and the very visual impact of having an air show, is for those organisations to lead the way, I suppose, and think about alternatives. Could we have like the Tour de France instead, going throughout all three towns, which would be more in keeping with the climate change, taking climate change seriously. So yes, really pleased to see this coming through, but yeah, I suppose we've all got some ways to go in terms of increasing discussion and openness. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rice. I'll bring in Councillor Hadley and then look to Councillor Green to come back. Andy.
Thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, I think as Councillor Green said, we all bar one in the council highlighted and quite early on in the whole existence of BCP the importance of the climate and ecological emergency. And I guess my concern with this paper is that we haven't tied ourselves to earlier targets. Even national government is talking about bringing forward the targets for changing, for moving away from fossil fuels for transport. But two things recently struck me. One was the Young Councillor of the Year Award, which was the local government organised, and our own Kieran Wilson was one of the candidates for it. He didn't win, but the guy that did win had set targets for this year to actually to get to zero carbon. I think it was Oxford, but that's my memory, so it might be wrong. But you know, the winner was really ambitious in terms of what he was trying to do. And the other thing that I was told was that the Amazon basin, because of particularly exports for meat production, the Amazon basin is going to be a net carbon emitter, whereas it's always been a carbon sink for the world. It's been a lung for the whole world, and in 10 years it may turn into actually a net CO2 producer. So, we have problems on a global scale. Some of those are produced by us locally, and we have to do all we can. We have the COVID emergency, we have the effects of Brexit, we have the climate emergency, and behind that, the ecological emergency. And those are kind of highlighted as four increasingly sized waves that can potentially overwhelm us. So it is an emergency. We all signed up to that, and I'd just like to see early action. And I hope that the action plan that we work together on, multi-party and with all the partners across the BCP, is something that we retain that sense of urgency on. And I guess particularly the leased buildings was mentioned. It's important that we don't just go, well, let's get rid of these leased buildings. There is something about how do we work with people to make sure that the carbon output of the built environment is reduced, and that is about insulation and better management rather than extra heating. So how do we make sure that stock doesn't return to just being in private hands and also still a bad emitter? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. Move back to you, Mike, to answer those questions and comments.
Thank you very much, Leader, and thank you both, Councillor Rice and Councillor Hadley. If I can address Councillor Hadley's first. Absolutely, we believe in ambitious targets. We also want to ensure that they are realistic targets. Without looking towards carbon offset, which is something that I feel is a way of self-satisfaction, really, rather than tackling the real issues. I see it as unlikely we would be able to achieve this year, for example, the carbon neutrality for BCP Council's operations. However, as we go forward, I would expect any opportunity to be taken to bring forward those targets, both the 2030 target and the 2050 target. And again, if you look back to our predecessor councils, you will see that as soon as it looked as though there was any opportunity to be able to improve on the carbon saving targets at that stage, those opportunities were taken. This administration will do exactly the same. I think Councillor Hadley is absolutely right to talk about the concentration on leased buildings and how we should be looking at them. Within the report, it talks about the LEAP programme, and that's something that we have been pushing forward with at pace again in the predecessor councils, and I'm pleased that the last administration was supporting that as well. I would like to look at how we might promote that still further, and maybe even look at how we could provide further insulation measures to those properties that do not quite qualify for LEAP because of the restrictions on who those can be given to. So that is something that I would like to look at and explore, possibly with members in the workshop that we'll hold following the results of the public engagement questionnaire flowing out. And I think that actually sort of brings us quite neatly into the points from Councillor Rice. And before I go on to talk about her specific question, I really do welcome the fact that we are all so much on the same page in the way that this is moving forward. I think that's the way that we will achieve our target, and hopefully achieve those targets sooner than we are originally hoping for and putting down in these papers. Because there is a big difference between providing insulation for properties, which saves carbon and also saves people money. It's pushing with the grain. As soon as we start to talk about items which would deprive 1.5 million people of the opportunity to enjoy a festival, one of the most important and successful festivals in Europe, that isn't something that will go forward as saving them money. It isn't something that pushes with the grain. It's the sort of item which puts people up against each other rather than getting people to unite in order to pursue a common gain. And that's where I feel that we as an administration are different from the previous one. We will concentrate on balance. We will concentrate on actions rather than words. We will concentrate on those that will make a difference and where we will be able to bring people forward with us. Because the council's operations account for only approximately 2% of the emissions that take place, that exist around the BCP area. We can act as a leader, but it's only by bringing people together that we'll achieve the real aim of that carbon neutrality at the earliest available point. So that is why I did not believe that we should be having a question to the population, which would you like to do something which will stop us bringing £30 million of benefits into this conurbation? Would you like to do something which would stop 1.5 million people plus enjoying themselves over that weekend and being excited by that, by what is being given to them for free by this council? That is a difference, and I'm very happy to defend it that way. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Green. Very helpful. I welcome any other councillors from Cabinet speaking. I don't see anybody raising. Just while we get to that point, I'd like to add my personal thanks to both of you actually. Mike and Fizz, there's been significant leadership from both of you in terms of getting us to this point. You've both mentioned that nearly all the council and indeed all of the Conservative administration are supporting the climate and ecological emergency. So you have my absolute commitment to that. And we've evidenced that by bringing forward a number of portfolios with environmental impact and indeed a ecology and biodiversity lead member. So absolutely. One thing we're also committed to doing is making sure there's a vibrant events calendar, and we're going to be bold and ambitious about what we're going to be doing, in terms of bolstering our economy across BCP. So we as an administration are completely committed to the Air Festival, and it's a festival, and look forward to continue doing that. What we should be having is that festival and and other festivals as well. So it's doing more, but it's making it impactful. Okay, thank you. I don't see anybody else wishing to speak on that item, so I will move to the vote. If anybody disagrees with moving forward on mass, please raise or flag now. I don't see that. So, Councillor Green, Mike, thank you very much for bringing that paper forward. That's has gone forward with unanimous support. I believe it's you again, Councillor Green, in terms of agenda item 14. We've got the Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole parking standards agenda. Mike.
Thank you again, Leader. The paper brings forward a consistent parking requirement for across the whole of BCP. It replaces the 3 individual requirements from the predecessor councils. Where it differs primarily from the previous SPDs is that it is proposing to introduce either reduced or in some case completely eliminated parking requirements, specifically for residential developments in the town and district centres, which are at least adequately served by public transport. And it does this by introducing a zonal approach, as you'll see as you go into the details. It does that for 2 related reasons. The first is that our roads at the moment are incredibly congested. We will be required by government to build new dwellings, as we know, over the next several years. And if we allow car ownership to grow at the same rate as we're increasing our residential development, then what is already a severe problem in a very short period of time. The second reason that we're doing this is that we are within this paper recognising and supporting both the council's and the government's commitment to the response to the climate change emergency that we've just been speaking about. And again, as we've seen within that paper, across BCP area as a whole, the transport provision is responsible for a huge amount of the greenhouse gas emissions, specifically those from private car. And this paper helps address that in that it's bringing more residents to be living and working within the areas which have acceptable public transport at the moment. In doing that and driving up those percentages, my hope is that it will encourage the bus companies particularly to see that increased demand as an opportunity to improve their services. As they improve those services and the frequencies, so more people want to use the public transport, and we will end up with this genuine virtuous circle that we are looking for as we try to affect the modal shift towards sustainable transport that we so desperately need. As a third reason, this will also, by taking the spaces that are currently, or the space that is currently used for car parking, and using it instead for provision of residential property, that will either allow the properties to be improved, or again for a greater density of properties to be built for residential purposes in the areas that we really want them to be built. In addition to the car parking measures, this paper also strengthens the requirement for cycle parking, and it dramatically increases the requirements and encouragement for both car clubs and electric vehicle charging points as we move forward in this one. And since the draft was written, the government is again recommitted and brought forward its targets for electric vehicle use. And so I would like to propose one late amendment to this paper, if I may. It can be found on page 322 of the report, which for some unknown reason is actually labelled as 372 on the papers itself. But it is on item 3.6.1, which talks about the requirement for electric vehicle charging points on new residential developments. And the change that I would like to propose in here is to say that wherever in BCP there is a house or a bungalow that is being built, that there will always be an electric vehicle charging point, an active one, that is introduced at the same time. And so after the first sentence in 3.6.1, which ends on the inclusion of charging points for electric vehicles in all new developments, I would like to add the sentence, proposals for houses and bungalows with at least one designated parking space within the curtilage of its own plot must ensure the installation of at least one active EV charging point. The result of that is that the table 1 just below it also needs a small amendment. It would have an extra line at the top, which is that all houses and bungalows have a minimum of one charging unit, with the percentage of bays being 100% for active. And for the next 2 rows, instead of just reading residential development less than 10 spaces and residential development with 10 plus spaces, we'll read all other residential development. So those are the 2 changes that I would like to, sorry, that is the main change that I would like to bring in with your permission, Cabinet. Again, this is something that gained cross-party support as we went through overview and scrutiny with, I think it's fair to say, almost unanimous agreement that this was a very good thing. Public consultation has taken place, and there were a number of suggestions that have been made which have been taken on board, and you'll be able to see in Appendix 2 the alterations that have been made and also the responses to all of those questions and comments that have come in from those who responded to the consultation. So now what I'm doing here is to bring this forward to Cabinet with the recommendations that we can then recommend it as the whole of Cabinet to go forward to Council. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mike. And can I just, before I also bring a second, can I just clarify what changes the recommendation? Are there specific changes to recommendation A and B?
No, there are no changes to the recommendations. The change is to the document that we're being asked to go to Cabinet, to Council to adopt.
Yeah, Thank you, Mark. I just wanted to check that. Really helpful. Okay, so I look for a seconder. Who would like to speak on this paper?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm delighted because it's got my name on it as well. This is a joint paper because it crosses over the transport side as well as and sustainability as well as the planning side, because this does feed into our planning policies, and actually I think very helpfully segues into the much larger piece of work that we will be doing on the local plan as well. So more than happy to second and completely agree with the amendment as well. The reason for the amendment has been highlighted by Councillor Green. It's a bit deeper than just wouldn't it be nice for every new build home to have a car park electric car charging point. Obviously that's the main aim of it, but actually it has a number of other consequences as well, and we're doing lots of pieces of work about how we help in the wider climate change mitigation agenda. And I think it's becoming more and more obvious by the day that electric car usage is and should increase as the years go on. We're probably on a period of exponential growth for that. So obviously it makes sense to incorporate that into our suggested standards going forward for new builds. But also it has some real consequences to how we build in some of that mitigation work and demonstrate that climate mitigation work with some of the other policies that we're going through. So I think it will be helpful in those policies as well, but also it just makes sense, doesn't it? So it's a very welcome addition, and thank you to Councillor Green for bringing that forward. I won't add too much more. Councillor Green has gone through most of the substance in there, except to say that I think this is very welcome from a number of different quarters. Councillor Green has brought about some of the primary focuses around how we get around in the future, particularly as we do become more urbanised. I mentioned earlier on in Cabinet that to take Bournemouth Town Centre as one of our prime urban areas, already we have almost half of the people that live there do have access to a car. I think that not only will grow in the future, but it also demonstrates that there is already a sizable population that live in these denser urban areas that don't need a car. And I think it's worth bringing out, this is not a big policy document that is telling people how they must live their lives. This is guidance for new developments that are being built in the future. And I think it's sensible and prudent that as we increase the density in our urban areas, that we give some guidance around whether people should be there with cars or not. And of course, the market will drive a lot of this, and actually, if people do not want to buy into a new development that doesn't have a car parking space, then they can choose to buy in developments that do have car parking spaces. And I think that's why the zonal approach to this is very, very important. I think one of the other things that would be worth drawing out as well is that this is not completely prescriptive. There is some variance in this, and I mentioned that market forces are always quite helpful in this. We're now enabling development in these more urban areas if they don't want to, not to have to provide parking, whereas actually in the past they did quite often have to provide parking. However, there is room for departure for that. So if you do have developments that are either slightly bigger or there is clearly a need for more parking and the market says that parking should be there, then there is flexibility within this for that to come forward. So actually, rather than saying we're banning cars completely from urban areas, that's not what this is saying. This is saying if new builds come forward, you can now bring them forward without parking necessarily, if that helps. There is some wiggle room within there as well, particularly for different types of developments. And I think that's really important, because one of the things that Councillor Green didn't talk about, and it's slightly more geeky, is the unintended consequences of some of the previous policies that we've had. In some of our urban areas, we have had a policy whereby if you're building new build apartments, for instance, in what is essentially a city centre, you had to provide parking for that. Now, what that actually does is, I think quite often sends a wrong message when car ownership is quite often low in this area. And of course, it adds to the congestion issues, but quite often it also drives the unviability of these schemes to even come forward. So as we try and encourage more housing to come forward to fulfill our housing need, we've been in a position previously where we've actually been driving the very developments away that we want because they just don't work because of the out-of-date parking policy requirements. This will unlock a lot of that. So this will hopefully enable our regeneration prospects to come forward and also get the right type of development in the right place. One of the unintended consequences that we've had previously in places like Bournemouth is that because a number of these schemes weren't viable because they had to provide parking, developers would bring forward a lot of student housing which didn't have to provide parking, and we ended up with a mass number of developments of student housing. So this is not the panacea. It's not going to fix everything, but it gives a clear direction of travel. It helps us, it maintains that flexibility, and I think this will be a really important part of what is a bigger job within the local plan going forward. So delighted to second this paper.
Great, thank you very much both. And Mike, I see you've raised. Can I bring you back in before I move on to ONS and the wider membership? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman, because I omitted one very important point in speaking in this, and that's to recognise that this paper has taken a huge amount of effort and not a small amount of time to be able to put together. And I omitted to thank both the officers, primarily Alexis Edwards and Rebecca Landsman, who have been very much involved in putting this together, but also both Councillor Andy Hadley and Councillor Margaret Phipps, who included me in the early version of this, and I've been very pleased to be able to include them in later versions as we've gone on. This is very much a collaborative effort, and I would like to pay particular thanks to both Andy and Margaret for bringing this forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. It's very helpful. So I'll just pause to see if any comments from scrutiny. If not, then I'll bring in Councillor Andy Hadley, followed by Councillor Rice. Andy.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't going to speak to this one, but several of the things I was just thinking about were covered, particularly by Councillor Broadhead, in terms of the complexities of changing these rules. And as Mike's just alluded, Councillor Phipps and I invited him to be involved in the process because of his expertise, and he repaid that, for which I'm grateful. My slight concern is with the addition that he's just made in terms of EV points for every new development, and I think this is partly because of the concerns about, is there actually enough raw materials to provide batteries for the number of cars if we convert all cars to electric, and what technologies sit behind that, and hydrogen is one, particularly for fueling cars, which is also being considered. So whether it needs to be EV specifically or around sustainable, that it's got to take account of sustainable transport options is my slight worry in terms of mandating EV for every individual house, because of the nature of what Councillor Broadhead said in terms of the on costs for that, if you're going to do it properly rather than just have a socket outside the house, and also for those properties that don't have their own frontage. So we haven't really got a solution for people who don't have any off-road parking, and they're moving to EVs, and how do we do that without disrupting the pavement for those people walking, because we want to encourage people to walk. So I'm slight concerned about that late addition and what the implications of that might be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andy. Mike, I'll bring in first, and then we'll come to you. So, Fizz, please.
Hi. Yes, I wasn't planning on speaking to this, but I was very inspired by Mike Green's amendment, and thought that I may just suggest thinking about electric bicycles. So it would be also very inspiring to see provision of electric bicycle sockets. It's much simpler than electric cars to install, and much more sort of financially realistic, as particularly with flats. But yeah, that would be something that would be really lovely to see added to all new developments, is the provision of that. But again, yes, Andy Hadley has also highlighted the difficulties. Initially, it sounds very inspiring, Mike Green had suggested, but I do have hopes that hydrogen vehicles will become much more commonplace as well. But this type of paper will be reviewed, I imagine, every few years or so. So I imagine that will adjust as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. And I'll come back to you, Mike, who I know is a very keen exponent of an electric bike. So
I'm a very keen exponent of both electric bikes and electric cars, as it happens. So being using both most of the time. Well, actually, Councillor Rice has answered for me on the point about hydrogen and other zero emissions propulsions that are likely to be available in the future, in that this will be a document that can be reviewed as we go forward. I would expect it to be reviewed certainly every few years, and definitely whenever there is a change that would make sense in the sort of vehicles that are available. As far as the provision of sockets for electric vehicles in houses and bungalows, it is quite specific. That is where there is a designated parking space already included within the planning application. And that's the wording I actually used was proposals for houses, bungalows with at least one designated parking space within the curtilage of its own plot must ensure the installation. So that would be if they had a car parking spot which is already going to have access onto the road, then that is where they must make sure that they have the EV charging. So I think we're covered up on that. As far as the electric bike charging points are concerned, you'll see within the requirements for cycle parking, it is required that there will be power to the cycle stores that are there. So one would, as Councillor Rice suggests, it's very, very easy to charge up an electric bike. You just use a normal power socket and they will be there within the bike sheds. So I think that we've covered that one as well. Thank you, Leader.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mike. And I'll now move forward to questions from Cabinet colleagues. First, bring in Nigel Brooks and then Karen Rampton. Nigel.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm interested to see in Appendix B the controlled parking zone map with 4 different zones indicated. And I thank the Cabinet member that we can now see clearly where the intention is to consider parking zones across the whole conurbation. I would just draw members to understand the map as it relates to the wards that they actually represent, as the 4 zones are quite extensive across the whole conurbation area. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll bring in Councillor Rampton and then ask Mike Green to sum up. Thank you, Karen.
Sorry, Chairman, can I just answer that one? Is that okay?
Yeah, if that would make more sense, please do, Mike. Yeah.
Thank you. Just to be clear, these are not parking zones that are designated in that map. These are the zones which in which the requirements will be in force. There are, as you go through the paper, it shows that with the different zones A, B, C, and D, there are different requirements for the number of car parking spaces and etc. And that's what are referred to in that map. The point, well, actually, maybe I'll come back later a little bit on the point about parking zones, if that's okay.
Great, absolutely. Councillor Rampton, Karen.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Chair. I'm just slightly concerned about this paper, and in terms of people choosing to live in a property that doesn't have any parking allocated. I don't think it's as simple as saying, well, you wouldn't get a property there if you didn't have need of a car, because we can all become unwell or socially isolated or need care, and some people require care sort of 4 times a day and at night, and there's absolutely no way that a carer who's usually on a very strict timescale and has to get between resident to resident would be able to park a distance away and then go and support that person in need of care. So I'm just concerned that we always do have a visit for that, or for somebody who might require service of a minister, for example. I mean, obviously, if you have a GP, they have special dispensation, but I'm not sure that carers, whether paid or informal, would have the same benefit. And I'd like some reassurance on that, please.
Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Yeah, absolutely, we do need to recognise that people's lives do change, and so the requirement on those coming in to be able to care for them has to be taken into consideration. Again, I think there might be just some slight confusion with the idea of parking zones. These are this is a requirement for the parking that will be required on site for new developments. This isn't talking about where people will be able to park outside their home at all. So I'm not sure that we would look to build flats with parking spaces incorporated within them, because of the potential that later in life somebody might want to might need a carer. That would not be a good use of space. And indeed, we have many thousands, tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands actually, of units within the BCP area, which already do not have parking on site. And this would increase the ratio of those within the areas that are well connected. But it does bring in the point about what happens if somebody is living within these within the car-free environment, or within a property which doesn't have a car parking space, and may want to have a car or may need to have a car at some stage. And the potential problem that we do have in some of these zones is that they are very close to areas, although most of them at the moment have no parking or restricted parking on street, for example, in the strict town centres. They are close to areas that do have parking and which already suffer from parking stress as people drive in, for commuters, for shopping or for whatever. And so it is probably going to be necessary, in fact, I'm sure it is going to be necessary, that we start to look more broadly at the complementary measure to this, which is to define areas around these zones, or close to these zones, these planning zones, where we would be bringing in parking restrictions to ensure that people can't say, okay, well, I'm buying a place that's got no parking space. I'm taking advantage of the reduced price to be able to do so, but I'm going to go and park in a place that doesn't have the restrictions 100 yards away. And so I do think that as we go forward in this, we will need to be looking very carefully at how we introduce controlled parking zones, which would allow us to have the Section 106 agreement as planning is introduced, or as planning permission is given, which means that those residences will be designated as car-free or car-capped developments. What that will mean is that the occupants of those properties will never be entitled to apply for a residence parking permit within that zone, and no occupant will in any time in the future. That does not mean that they will not be able to apply for a blue badge, and certainly we would ensure that there are facilities for people to be able to do so. It does not mean that we can't include dispensations for carers, for ministers, and for others as they come in. And indeed, as we look at areas around the country that have done exactly that, I'm sure that we would have to ensure that that would take place in any parking zones that we introduced here as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mike. I don't have any other members wishing to speak. So unless you do, please raise now. Just like to sort of add my support to the paper and the work doing. It's a step change, isn't it? But it's a responsible one. It will facilitate our regeneration ambitions. I think Councillor Rampton raised some good points in terms of ultimate access, etc. But thank you very much for your comments on them, Mike. Okay, can I just check if anybody would like to comment before we move on? No. Okay. So in terms of taking the decision here, I'll take that as a unanimous decision unless I hear anybody from otherwise. I've got one abstention raised, which from Councillor Karen Rampton. So does anybody else wish to abstain or disagree? If not, I'll move forward. Can I just check with Democratic Services where we have an abstention? Do I need to then now take the vote for the other 9 members of Cabinet, or can we move forward?
No, that's fine, Chairman. If everyone else is in favour of the application, then the agenda item will move forward.
That's great. Okay. So thank you very much, Councillor Green and Broadhead, for moving forward, for bringing that paper to us. Very happy that we've been able to support it. Okay, that moves on to agenda item 15, Dorset Nature Park, and I'll bring in Councillor Phil Broadhead.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. This is a really as an interesting one that wasn't even on my radar until it landed, and it's all to deal with the problem of eutrophication. Now, of course, we all know what eutrophication is, don't we? Or well, I certainly didn't until a number of weeks ago. But what it is, and it explains it in the paper, is that Poole Harbour is as we know, is an area of as a triple SI and a special protection area. And what we increasingly finding is that eutrophication is going on, which is excess nitrogen being released into the harbour, which then results in things like the algae blooms that we may have seen, which in turn have really negative effects on things like our feeding birds and protected birds, and just the kind of whole nature ecosystem in general. There's two primary causes of this. Number one is agricultural land and the nitrates that are put through as part of fertilization, the runoff of that going into the water system, which then ends up in the harbour, causes it. The other thing that causes it is residential development, because as the nitrates work their way through the sewage treatment works, we can remove a lot of the nitrates, but not all of it. So what we've actually got to do as part of the Poole local plan policy is to try and deal with this and mitigate that in a way that we can. Now, the long-term aim is to, within as development increases in the area, to look at the sewage treatment works and try and take all of the nasties out of it that way. We haven't quite got there yet, so we are required to still try and mitigate that problem. And a very neat, tidy way of doing that is to look at the other source of the issue for eutrophication, which is agricultural land, and to try and mitigate the ongoing development in the area by taking out some of the nitrates from the agricultural land to balance the problem that way. And this is really important to do, because as we go forward, we've got over 2,000 planned homes in the existing Poole local plan alone. We've got to solve this issue in one way or another, otherwise we're not allowed to continue the development. So the plan here in this paper is essentially to buy some agricultural land that is currently used for agricultural purpose, and therefore putting these nasty nitrates into the system, to buy that with the money that we get from development. So there's at no cost to the taxpayer whatsoever. This comes from developer contributions. And to repurpose that agricultural land into a nature park, so that stops that land being used from an agricultural purposes, stops the nitrates from there, and enables us to continue development overall into the future. It's a nifty solution at present. By no means is it a long-term solution, although as we all know, agricultural methods keep increasing as we go forward. So perhaps that is part of the puzzle. But clearly we need to do further work on making sure that as we progress with new developments in the future, that as little of the nitrogen makes its way through the system that way as well. But this is a plan that we've got at the moment. So the recommendations are in there, which is to have an agreement to go out and purchase this land. What we'll then do is get Dorset Wildlife Trust to manage this on an ongoing basis for us as a nature park. So it resolves an issue. It hopefully fixes some of the issues that are happening in Poole Harbour. It enables development to go forward into the future as we try and ramp up our redevelopment plans, and it also creates a nice nature park as well. We haven't release the exact position of this nature park yet, because it is still in the throes of going through, and that's still confidential until that is done. It's not directly in the BCP area, it is just slightly outside of the BCP area, but that hopefully, if we take this through cabinet today, that will enable all of that to go forward. So there's a little bit of information for you. I never knew this existed until fairly recently, but it's a jolly good solution to what is clearly an ecological problem, and resolves a number of issues in one go. So I seek a seconder.
Sorry, I was on mute there. Thank you very much, Phil. And I do we have a seconder for this paper?
Hello, Chairman. Yes, Councillor Iyengar. Happy to second.
Thank you very much. Great.
If I may say a few words, Chairman, thank you.
Please do.
Yeah, I'm happy to second this. Again, I won't repeat everything Councillor Broadhead has said, but the nitrogen problem is known, not least in my own ward, by several people as it manifests itself in algae. One of which of the root causes is excess nitrogen in the water. But it's not just in my area, in various other areas. It is a problem. There's no quick fix to it, undoubtedly. And I think, as the proposer, Philip, has said, this is not meant to be a long-term and permanent solution to the problem, but actually as a short-term sort of to tide us over for some time. It is quite neat and it's deliverable very, very quickly. So in that respect, I do support this paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, both. This wasn't taken through scrutiny, but I've got so we'll move on to the wider membership now and have Councillor Andy Hadley first. Andy.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I'd like to be in support of this proposal, but I do have some concerns about it, and I guess, like Councillor Broadhead, it's sort of something that's come up a bit out of the blue, and I think part of that is the problem with the nitrates. It's not just about nitrates, it is about sewerage, and I raised in full council, and Councillor Anderson gave me some assurance trying to battle that problem more directly, but in creating extra units, we are adding to the problems of sewage, and that includes E. coli and even COVID in untreated sewage, particularly when you get heavy rainfall and storm overflow. So I'd much rather we were tackling that problem directly rather than nitrates in the rural area. And I think part of this, the options appraisal talked about education and working with farmers. The NFU website says there's 2,241 farm units, farm holdings in Dorset, commercial farm holdings, and to be just taking one of them out of the system seems a bit like tokenism for me. It's great. It's nice to have another nature park. I worry about the food production. I'd much rather our food production was done more sustainably across the piece, and we work with all farmers to reduce their reliance on sticking nitrates in the soil. It's something that we believed in the last 50 years that we knew better than nature, but actually the way in which we've been farming for millennia, in tune with the land that we're working on, has huge benefits, including this problem of nitrates leaching out. I think the part of this as well is about the wilding. So I've read the book Wilding. It's about NEP in West Sussex, and it's used as a beacon and an education centre worldwide for how we get back to allowing the land to really tell us how it wants to work, really. It'll take some time to do. So it's not a quick fix. Councillor Broadhead talked about it as an interim step, but it is actually a long-term strategy. It's taken 20 years and more to get to a properly rewilded area. So I really hope we are going to move forward quickly with the education, with working with all farmers across the Dorset area. I think the other issue is the paper we've just had about the SPD for parking, because we've said that in the town centre areas, the people who are paying for this are not the developers, they're the people who buy their properties. And we're saying to them, actually, you don't need to have a car. And yet we're going to put a nature park that they're going to pay for, probably out of their reach. I did find out where this centre is, but it's actually really quite difficult if you don't have a car to get into the rural parts of Dorset. So I think that there's a bit of a disconnect there in terms of the people who are funding this and their ability to perhaps take advantage of it. And I welcome the opportunity to make sure that our conditions include good access through the site, walking, cycling, improving, not just sustaining the rights of way, if that's a possibility. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hadley. Before I move on to the Cabinet colleagues, Phil, would you like to comment?
Yes, no, thank you, Councillor Hadley, for your input on that. It's clearly something that, as Councillor Mohan Iyengar said as well, that we've got to look at on a more long-term basis. And I'm pretty confident, as well, we see on a yearly by yearly basis new technologies come out. Fertilization in the agricultural sphere is very different from what it was only 10, 20 years ago. So there's hope there, and we all need to pull together on this. Having said that, and it makes it pretty critically clear in this paper under part 6 of the paper, under paragraph 6, that yes, we need some long-term solutions, but we also need a solution right now. If we don't do something and mitigate 105 hectares of agricultural land during this forthcoming year, we will not be able to build the 1,366 homes that are currently agreed with planning permission in Poole. We need that 68 hectares immediately, and then we need the 105 to get to that full 2,000 homes. It's clear we need to build homes. It's clear that we need to fulfill that need for housing in our area. And frankly, at the moment, this is the only way to unlock that problem in the short term. Of course, we need to look at a more long-term solution, but it does resolve the issue for the immediate problem we have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Phil. Completely agree. Thank you. I'll move on to Cabinet colleagues now and have Mark Anderson.
Thank you, Chairman. I totally support this paper. I think it's a very good paper. I would just like to answer a couple of points that have been raised. The problem with nitrates runoff is it's not just the runoff that's been applied in the last year, it's the runoff that's in the soil, and that can take 10 years plus to come out of the soil and leaching out. So it is a long-term problem that we need to look at, but I'm very pleased to see that we are starting to tackle the short-term part of it. In answer to some of the points raised by Councillor Hadley, I point out that we have a very innovative scheme that we've introduced into Poole Harbour, where we are training AI to look at monitoring the pollution around the oyster beds in particular, so that we can see where the pollution's coming from. And as he has intimated, I am very much involved in talking to the Environment Agency and looking at the sewer outfalls. When I first started to look at it, I couldn't believe how many outfalls there were into Poole Harbour, and I think there are far too many there. Ideally, I'd like to sit down to zero, but I certainly like to see a reduction. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Anderson. Okay, so I don't have any other councillors wishing to speak on this this item, so I'll move to the vote. I haven't heard any disagreement, so unless I hear any now, I'll take that as a unanimous support. Okay, thank you. Not hearing anything, so happy to move that forward. Thank you very much for Phil and everybody commenting on that paper. So that moves us forward to agenda item 16, the domestic abuse. So I'll first of all bring forward Councillor May Haynes to introduce this item.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. So before I actually say any more, I will actually be bringing an amendment to the recommendation as set out in the paper. And when I go into the introduction, then I think Cabinet colleagues will realise why that amendment is being made. So this report sets out the key priorities for the BCP Community Safety Partnership to prevent domestic abuse, and a strategy is actually attached to this paper. To be clear, this is actually a two-stage approach. So this is the first phase. This is the high-level strategy, and it is an important and complex piece of work which will determine the partnership's approach to tackling domestic abuse over the next 3 years. The Community Safety Partnership has already signed up to the principles outlined in the strategy, and we are committed to work together in the important next phase of the development of a delivery plan, which will set out how our ambitious objectives will be met, and that will be where the measurables, the targets, and also the measures of success will actually be set out there. So this item did go to ONS on Monday last week. There was a very spirited debate, if I can put it that way. But I think that also there were some very good points and very good comments that were actually raised by the members of the ONS board, and I thank them for the constructive feedback that they actually made. But having said that, a lot of the comments were actually centered around the next stage, i.e. stage 2, and related to the delivery plan. And they were very valid comments to say, well, it's all well, this is a strategy, and how are you actually going to deliver on it? And that's actually stage 2 of this process. So I have actually also fed back the comments that were made from the ONS board to the Community Safety Partnership, who are responsible for delivering this strategy. And they also agreed that, yes, a lot of the comments relate to stage 2, which is about to start, and that is in drawing up the delivery plan. So I want to assure Cabinet that the work for the Community Safety Partnership this year has been focused on ensuring that our collective response to the increased risks of domestic abuse during the COVID pandemic, in meeting need and supporting those experiencing such terrible difficulties, because we have seen that there's a rising trend in the number of domestic abuse incidents are being reported, and we are absolutely, as a council, committed to dealing with these issues and providing good outcomes for the victims of these incidents, which can be very, very traumatic in some instances, because it's not just the person, but it's families that are involved here. So bearing all that in mind, Chair, I would like to move an amendment to the recommendation before us, which is to note the first stage of this work that has taken place, which has met with the approval of the Community Safety Partnership, and that this item will then be brought back to Cabinet at the earliest opportunity, along with the delivery plan. And this will therefore then give the opportunity for the ONS board to actually look at the delivery plan. I'm very, very keen that it is brought back at a stage where ONS can give meaningful feedback in order to help shape the delivery plan, and then we can move forward. So that is the amendment I propose, Chair, i.e. that we note the work so far, and that the report will come back along with the delivery plan, which will then go through the normal process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, May, for bringing that forward, and I completely endorse your recommendation to move to just noting this report. It's a good opportunity to thank the Overview and Scrutiny Committee and Councillor Bartlett for leading that process. Is there any, Councillor Bartlett, is there anything you would like to add to this paper? If not, I'll ask for wider membership.
We did actually make a recommendation, and I think it's probably appropriate that I do read it out, although I apologise, just covered the main issue. Please. Yeah, there was a very, very long debate, very spirited debate, I think is an appropriate description, but there were a myriad of issues that were raised, and as a result of that, the committee made the following recommendation, and that is the Overview and Scrutiny Board recommended that this item is withdrawn from the December Cabinet meeting to allow time for the issues raised by the Overview and Scrutiny Board to be considered further in order to update the strategy document and to present it to a future Overview and Scrutiny Board and Cabinet together with the high-level delivery plan. And I think that probably reflects what Councillor May has just agreed to. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely, and apologies from me, Chair. I was aware you'd made a recommendation. I just didn't have my notes in front of me. So thank you for the work on it. Okay, are anybody from the wider membership wishing to speak? If not, I'll move on to Cabinet colleagues. Okay, thank you. So that's Councillor Rampton. Karen. I believe you're on mute, Karen.
Sorry. Happy to second Councillor Haynes' proposal. It seems a very sensible way forward. Thank you.
Great. Okay, I don't have any other members wishing to speak, so I'm not entirely sure we need to technically move forward on a vote on this item, but where it is proposed and seconded formally, I'll ask anybody who has any disagreement with accepting the noting of this report. No, I'm not seeing that, so thank you very much, May, and again, thanks to the Overview and Scrutiny Board for their constructive work on that paper. Okay, so that moves us on to agenda item 17, which is the housing scheme at Wilkinson Drive. So I'm going to hand over to Councillor Lawton. Bob.
Thank you, Leader. BCP Council, this is a BBC Council owned site which comprises open space and a disused play park, which, funnily enough, was identified as surplus to requirements in 2009 by the Bournemouth Neighbourhood Plan. The current proposals present a new build scheme of 4 by 3 bed houses and 9 by 2 bed flats with some parking within that scheme. The recommendations to Cabinet are to approve and commence the completion of the bill subject to the conditions set out in the financial strategy, approve the proposed funding model for the scheme with specific approval for the 1.2 new prudential borrowing to be repaid from the HRA over 50 years, approve the designation of the site as social rented housing and acknowledge the financial impacts as set out in paragraph 24, 25 and 48, and approve or authorise the section 151 officer in consultation with the portfolio for finance to determine the detailed funding arrangements. This is a good scheme which will add to our housing portfolio and enable us to house more people and take them off the housing register because, as you're probably aware, the housing register list is quite a long one for BCP and we need to tackle it, and it is a priority for this council, as per in fairness to the previous administration, to build as many homes for residents as possible, and I recommend it to the Cabinet.
Thank you very much, Bob, and Councillor Mark Anderson. Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm more than happy to second this. I particularly like the environmental aspects of this build, the fact that they're putting photovoltaic cells on the roof, that we've got triple glazing going in, and that we are going to be looking at the passive house standards to see what we can do. It will help and ensure that there is no heat or fuel poverty in these properties. The other issue that I'm very interested in is the fact that we're talking about using heat pumps to introduce a heating requirement, particularly in the light of the government's stated aims for removing gas from heating and cooking in, I think it's 2025. So I'm very, very pleased to support it. I would ask the portfolio holder if I could be involved in the discussions on the heat pumps and how they're going to do it, because I think that is probably a way forward that we look at for the whole of the conurbation, and I'd like to be involved in those discussions if I may. Apart from that, I'm very happy with it.
I'm sure that won't be a problem, Mark. Okay, so let me just see if I don't believe it was taken through overview and scrutiny. No, it wasn't. I don't have any members of the wider membership wishing to speak, so I'll move on to our Cabinet colleagues. Again, nobody looking to raise on the item, so I will, unless I hear otherwise, I'm not seeing any disagreement, so I'll take that forward as unanimous support. And no, not hearing any issues, so thank you very much. That's gone through with unanimous support. Moving us forward to agenda item 18, which again is you, Councillor Lawton, housing scheme at Duck Lane.
Thank you, Leader. Again, another exciting project where we're going to meet our housing need. This is a site which is at the old, which is not at the old, because I developed Duck Lane under the Bournemouth Council. This is a site around in the area of the Duck Lane residency, and this proposal is for 12 two-bed flats. The particular area where we're proposing to build that is some disused garages, and unfortunately there is some fly tipping and some other antisocial behaviour which goes on that area. So this is an excellent scheme. The recommendations are to approve and commence the completion of the bill subject to the conditions set out in the financial strategy, approve the proposed funding model for the scheme with specific approval for the use of the 1.684 million of prudential borrowing which will be repaid over 50 years, and approve or authorise the section 15 officer in consultation with the portfolio for finance to determine the funding arrangements. Again, as I reiterated in the previous papers, these are all good, excellent schemes which adds to our housing portfolio and enables us to house people, which is from the housing list schemes which are available within the town. As I said earlier, and I keep repeating myself, it is a good scheme, and I'm really pleased to bring it forward to the Cabinet for approval.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Bob. Okay, I'll look to Cabinet colleagues for a seconder. And I believe got Councillor Mike White.
Thank you, Leader. Very happy to second this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, that didn't go through the wasn't taken through the overview and scrutiny process. the Scrutiny Committee. Anybody from the wider membership wish to speak? No. Anybody from the Cabinet Group wish to comment on this paper? No. Then I'll just thank Bob for bringing it forward. It's good to get these developments happening. So I don't see any disagreement. So if you do disagree about taking this paper forward, please comment now. No. Okay, so that paper has passed unanimously, which moves us on to organisational design, which I'm very happy to bring forward. It's agenda item 19. Colleagues, this is a really important paper for us in our ambition of achieving the vision on establishing BCP as the exemplar council that was intended at the outset of the LGR journey. As part of our commitment to closing the MTFP gap at the last Cabinet meeting, we agreed to ask myself and Julian Osgothorpe, our Corporate Director, to bring forward a paper starting the process of detailing how we would deliver the £15 million of savings required, and we've now hardwired into our MTFP. The paper talks about how we're going to do that at some pace. To be clear, and I think it's worth highlighting, this paper and the wider transformation strategy doesn't increase the overall target in terms of savings, but it does materially bring forward the phasing of the reduction. In terms of the £15 million and how we will get to that reduction, there were three main areas in the original KPMG document, and this focuses on two main areas in terms of reduction: headcount reduction through the smarter structures work, and also reduction in third-party spend, with the majority of this 15 million looking to come through from the smarter structures work. This has always been a strategy for BCP, but that doesn't mean that this isn't a really difficult time for our staff. One positive of bringing this forward is that the level of uncertainty will be reduced. The length of time before we get to our firmed up solution is being reduced by bringing this forward. And we are really committed to engaging with all staff throughout this process. I've been very happy to do that, and I know officers have spent a significant amount of time doing that. Examples that we've had as administration have brought forward is enhancing the work with our staff network groups, which has been really useful. For the first time, we've brought trade unions into the senior leadership equalities group. So it remains for me to say no one will be left behind in this process. This is really important in our wider ambition for BCP. It's important for our budget process and long-term financial sustainability, and therefore this is it's a vitally important piece of work for our residents. And I'm very happy to propose, and I'll look for a seconder. Councillor Broadhead, Phil.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I'm completely happy to second this. I mean, it's pretty obvious to anybody that looks at what we've done with bringing the councils together that there has to be a transformation agenda. That was the reason we went on this, and you're bringing a number of authorities together. Invariably, there are that can and should go through. And I think it was really important for you to draw out the point that this paper isn't about going harder, but it's about going faster. So this isn't fundamentally changing the plans for how we want to and should transform what the council does, but it does accelerate those plans. And I just think that that's completely obvious, isn't it? I think you look around at what the private industry are doing, at how we're all living our lives very differently. And actually, if there was a positive to the terribleness of the global pandemic, it is that we are working much more creatively, much more efficiently in many ways, and that works perfectly in line with what we want and need to do to try and improve the offering of what the council does, which fundamentally is about improving services for real people. I think it's drawn out myself. I'm actually currently in a civic building at the moment because I'll be doing a Facebook Live very shortly, and it's empty. And it's absolutely empty. And it's not empty because the work is not being done or we're not providing services. It's empty because through the situation that we're in, we're having to work differently. And that was always the end game of a lot of this anyway. So that has already been accelerated due to the circumstances we're in. And therefore, it makes sense to capitalise on that going forward. A final point from me, just echoing the point that you'd said, Chair, which is that this isn't about leaving anybody behind as well. I actually think quite the opposite. Many of us that have been intimately involved in the process all the way through and been talking to a number of particularly council staff through this journey know that it's quite unsettling for them to worry about what the future looks like in terms of their working environment. That has been going on for a number of years now, and the longer that process is drawn out, the more unsettling that is for them. Let's provide some clarity. Let's seize on the opportunities that we've got of working differently now, see those savings earlier on, and that will do one thing and one thing alone: give more money for us to spend on services for real people. So I'm really pleased to be seconding this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phil. Okay, so I'll move forward to the chair of ONS, Stephen Bartlett. Steve.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Broadhead has touched on it, but there are two main areas of concern that the Overview and Scrutiny Board had on this, and the first one was the concerns that we have for our staff and the process that we're going through, and the second one was the risks associated with bringing the programme forward, in particular the risks associated with the provision of some service, and in particular children and adult services. As a result of that discussion, the board have made the following recommendation. The Overview and Scrutiny Board recommend to Cabinet that it notes the proposed new approach and request that the Council continue to consult staff extensively and ensures that adequate support is available to staff to ensure their well-being during the transformation process, and that it continuously monitors the Council's capacity, particularly within children's and services and adult services. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bartlett. I've looked to see if any, I'll comment on the recommendation shortly. I'll look to see if any other members of the wider councillor group wish to speak, and I do have George Farquhar. So, George.
Thank you, Chair, and I would wholeheartedly support those recommendations from ONS. I would push perhaps to suggest that there could be some reassurance or guarantee from Cabinet and from full Council as regards protecting both children's and adult services from this accelerated plan. I think with the Ofsted report and some of the points which it highlights, I don't think putting more uncertainty into those particular roles and services, these individuals with high expectations of them, would be beneficial to delivering on the Council's #1 priority, being children's services, as we established earlier in the meeting. The other thing which I would ask for is, I've looked at the paper, is to have the Council in some way highlight the role of the unions in this accelerated process, and what questions are being asked by the unions, and what answers and reassurances are being given to the unions for the protection of our workforces for this accelerated plan. So one is the suggestion that perhaps we give some reassurance to our children and adult services staff, and two, from my perspective, some outline as regards what's going to be published as regards the unions, the questions that they're asking on behalf of our staff, and the answers that are being given, and what reassurances they're getting for the protection of our staff during the accelerated process.
Brilliant, and Stephen, what I'll do, I'll address some of the points that are similar, particularly in terms of the children and adults and the focus there. So it's significant investment, as you can see from the earlier paper, is going into children's this year, but much more, investment, net gain in investment is going into the budget process for next year. And George and the Overview and Scrutiny Committee and the wider membership will be able to see more detail of that through the Budget Cafe on Friday. So there's an absolute commitment for us. And I think actually this is a really good point that's raised, because it allows us to say, and Councillor Broadhead pulled it out earlier, and was quite right to do so, this is actually about transforming our services. It's about putting more money into our priorities and more money into our front line by having a better organised, effectively back office. So it's actually about what we're here doing is to be more ambitious about how we can deliver children's and adult services, and put more, often more money into it. So I hope that gives some assurance. Yes, okay, and then in moving on to the some of the points by George, I think it's also worth saying that there's an opportunity around transformation. We've got a department of children's services that needs to evolve and improve, and it's not just about money doing that. It's about culture and investment in different processes. So effectively, we've got a department that's crying out to be transformed. So it's not about protecting it. Not doing nothing isn't protecting either of those departments or any of our departments. And I'm really committed to, and been really welcomed the approach by children's services teams and the leadership team in children's services, who are really embracing that ambition. George also mentioned about the unions. I believe I mentioned it in my earlier introduction. Inviting the unions to the senior leadership equalities group, where every stage of transformation is going through, is something that we've done. This has come from our Conservative administration to do that, and it wasn't something that was done under the Unity Alliance. So in terms of engagement, we're fully on board with engaging both with the unions and the wider staff, and we're very much happy to take any suggestions in terms of well-being and how we can engage further or offer any more in terms of that, because it's a complete and utter commitment from us to do it. Okay, thank you. I'll now move on to Cabinet colleagues for their comments, and I have Councillor Duff. Bobby.
Thank you for allowing me to speak, and thank you for the comments made by Councillor Bartlett, very many of which I echo and also had raised. I think the first thing to mention is children's services, the transformation that we'll be looking at. Of course, also just one small part of it, we'll be looking at where we use our agency staff, and the transformation, I hope, we'll be looking at perhaps increasing our full-time and the substantive employees as opposed to being quite so reliant on agency staff, which I think staff will really appreciate, but it'll also bring real value for money and some real transformational design and improved services for our children and our adult services. The leader is quite right. We've reviewed our terms of references for the senior leadership equalities group. We reviewed our internal governance and delivery framework, and we noticed that there was a gap at the table, one that the previous leader did not want filled, and we have invited the trade unions to come and sit around that table with the chief executive, with the leader of the council, and be involved at the very earliest opportunity to engage. In doing that, we've strengthened obviously the communication lines with employee equality champions and our staff network groups, and I'm really pleased to say that as a result we will be attending some of their meetings, won't be attending all of it. They may want to speak freely. But it not only allows us to engage with the staff, but it also means that the staff can engage with us. I'm really pleased with some of the work that's come out of this paper. It shows that we are listening, we're engaging, but it's also co-production and ensuring that our staff and our residents and how we deliver services is at the very heart of everything that we do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very well put. Okay, I don't have any other Cabinet colleagues wishing to speak at this point, so I will move on with the vote on the paper. I don't have anybody showing disagreement, so please show now. If otherwise, I'll take that forward as a unanimous support. Okay, that's great. So no disagreement there, and we move forward as a unanimous decision under Cabinet. Thank you to Councillor Farquhar and Bartlett for their contributions. Okay, that moves us to item number 20. That is on children's services, and we're going to have a verbal update now from the Director of Children's Services. So I'll call on Elaine Reading to speak first, and then we'll look to bring in Councillor Mike White. Elaine.
Afternoon, Leader and Council members. I want to start by saying that I have been listening carefully to Cabinet this morning, and I am in a very privileged position to see the commitment from you all around the ambition that you have for children and young people. Quite frankly, the technical language I could use is corporate parenting, and you've all demonstrated through your comments and through your actions outside of Cabinet, your absolute commitment, which is no different to that within children's social care, which I feel very privileged to be leading. So I just wanted to recognise that before I go into the 3 weeks post the publication of the focus visit. You all would have had an opportunity to have read that, and some of you in overview and scrutiny have already heard my response to it. It was a really difficult and uncomfortable read, as we would expect it to be, given the challenges that we face. The response from the partnership, from the corporate team, from the political colleagues cross-party, as already been mentioned, and indeed the children and young people themselves. I've spent an awful lot of time repairing relationships across all of those individuals, and also collectively, particularly with the challenges that we faced around some of the school references. So I just want to give you some assurance that this is not insurmountable. It is not systemic. It was a failure of leadership and management, which we have taken swift action to address. We are experiencing some challenges around agency and permanent, and the focus on the health and well-being of our staff is a key priority for us, along with the transformation of services, which will bring about the modernisation that is absolutely critical to the sustainability of you moving from requires improvement to good to outstanding, which I know is what you wish to achieve. So moving on to from the Ofsted letter, as you know, an action plan has been developed. Every single line of the Ofsted letter I have read, and we have co-produced with the service an action plan that addresses every single one of those points. There will be a version of that action plan that will be in the public domain, and it will be regularly reported on post the improvement board, which meets every 6 weeks. So there will be some consistency around how we are both reporting, measuring our successes, dealing with our challenges, and offering assurance or not. It's going to be a marathon, not a sprint, although we will be required to sprint at certain points because we will be having an Ofsted full inspection next year. So the action plan, just in short, covers what we're calling obsessions. It's language I wish us all to start using. We've got 7 obsessions: management oversight, open and inclusive culture, child-centred, transformation of key services, practice leadership, making systems stronger, and everyday practice. So under Brighter Futures, you should become very familiar with those 7 obsessions, and that's the work streams that will deliver against the action plan. There's lots of detail underneath it, as you would expect, but they are the things that we absolutely need to keep focused on. And as I say, we need to be obsessed about, because they are the building blocks to the success of the sustainability of the improvements within the service. It would be very easy to bring in a whole raft of interims to be able to deliver improvements. We have taken a very pragmatic but also courageous approach, supported again by my corporate colleagues and my political members across party, in terms of ensuring that we have the right balance between experienced interims but also our own individual. We have an awful lot of talented individuals within BCP, and affording them opportunities to be able to be part of the sustainability of your leadership team going forward is what we've co-created. And that's not without its risk, but it absolutely is the right strategy in terms of being able to have a sustainable leadership team going forward. When I say risk, just to be clear, the risk, of course, is that we have colleagues that will be learning with us, as well as being able to have impact. And so there will be some occasions where, quite rightly, it might take longer to get to a point, because we are on a learning journey collectively, rather than having one particular individual leading. So I just wanted to give assurance on the fact that we have an action plan that is open to a load of scrutiny, and it is a lot of scrutiny. Goodness, there's no hiding place. It's familiar territory when you have the number of challenges that we do. and we need to remain open to this high support and high challenge that comes from those areas of scrutiny, including the Department of Education. We had the first improvement board yesterday. That is chaired by Anthony Douglas, who's our independent DFE advisor. The council took a courageous step by inviting Anthony Douglas in before we had the focus visit, when it became apparent that we had significant weaknesses. That is an unusual step for any local authority, because you would ordinarily have a DFE advisor if you were inadequate and had been subject to a full inspection. We are not in that position. We have been proactive, and that is a different way of responding to improvement. And I think that should be recognised, because it isn't a natural way to respond. You usually end up with governance being or directions of, rather than asking for. It's a good place to start. At the improvement board yesterday, there was recognition that we put building blocks in place, partly to do with the interim senior leadership, as I say, which has a mixture of our own talented individuals, but also some seasoned interims that have made commitments to BCP. So we're not talking short term, we are talking 12, 18 months, what is required to make sure that we have the building blocks sustained. There's also been recognition from the improvement board yesterday about the cross-party working, the political and the corporate support. This is not just a children's social care challenge. It's been owned by us all, and that's partly what I was hearing earlier today. And as I say, that's a very privileged position to be in. In terms of the budget cafe on Friday, you will see, as already has been referenced, the detail around the investment that you're making and how that is being spent in year and how that is going to be spent over the next financial year. But I just want to be clear that we are in no way moving ourselves from the efficiencies and savings that are also required. Children's is not special, we are not unique, and we are engaging in the transformation programme with absolutely the same spirit and agenda as everybody else within the corporate team. I don't have anything else to say at this moment in time, unless Councillor White would like me to give any more detail. I just don't want to leave people with lots of information and no answers. So I need some guidance, Councillor White, as if that's enough information.
I very much appreciate what you've said. I had a list of about half a dozen things I was going to comment on, and I've just been going through ticking them off as you've been speaking. I just make two comments, I think. Firstly, in case there's any doubt about it at all, I would like to be absolutely clear that as lead member, I fully accept the criticism that Ofsted has made, and I think I speak on behalf of the whole councillor team. The other thing I would like to say, I really would underline my appreciation for the cross-party support that we're getting. I think it's desperately important, because this really is a massive priority. We are having regular meetings with the group leaders and the chief executive. We've had 2 meetings already, and the third one is planned for later today. So I hope we can keep up this level of cross-party support. That's really important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elaine, and also Mike. Very useful, and we've said on a number of occasions now, and including a number of occasions in this meeting today, how much of an important area children's is for us. It is our priority area for this administration. We absolutely have to get it right, and I can assure Elaine that this cabinet, this administration is obsessed, about getting it right. I'll bring in now Councillor Nicola Green. Nicola.
Thank you, Leader, and I absolutely endorse all the comments that have come throughout the meeting, as well as on this single item. I just thought it might be worth spending a little while on just setting out the governance arrangements that we've set in place, because I think they are important, and they do start with Anthony Douglas, the advisor appointed by the Department for Education, and we need to be very clear about his his role in providing support and consistent challenge to the local authority for his determined and supportive engagement. He of course chairs the improvement board, as Elaine has set out, but it's really important to note the other lines of sight into this work, and clearly the Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Board are very much involved in that, and the Overview and Scrutiny Board itself will be looking at the budgetary implications through its work as the budget comes forward, to make sure that we are supporting children's services in the way that we've said that. And of course, sitting alongside that, White referred to the group leaders meeting, which come together after each improvement board. And what that does is it all adds up to a transparency and accountability, both to but also from all members, that this really is something. We've mentioned corporate parenting, and it's vital, and it's not something that sits just within the remit of children's services. It relates to every one of the 74 members who are currently elected, and will, after the by-elections, sit every bit as much with our two new colleagues. So it's really important to note, I think, that accountability goes both ways. And also to note that that is exactly mirrored in the officers' structure. And I'm very grateful to the Chief Executive for his lead and Elaine's determination that this isn't simply a children's services issue. And we've already seen some fantastic support coming forward from other areas of the organisation, which are able to help with their particular expertise. And the reason why does this all matter? It's because one aim in sight, and that is the delivery of consistently good services for all the children of BCP. We won't stop until we get there. Plenty of work still to be done, but I'm very grateful to all members and the officers today for the opportunity to provide that clarity and that visibility into the journey. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Thank you. Okay, do any other Cabinet colleagues wish to speak on this agenda item? Okay, we don't have to move forward to a decision where we are just receiving a verbal update. So, Elaine, I'll just say again, thank you ever so much for the work you're doing and for providing us an update here. And we look forward to working with you and receiving many more as we move forward at some pace in moving this department and outcomes for our children forward. So, thank you. Okay, that moves us on to agenda item 21, which is our forward plan. Do members wish to make any comments in relation to it? I'm not intending to go through it in detail, as we've all received it. I'll move to Councillor Mayhanes. May.
Thank you very much, Chair. My bad, I haven't actually looked at the forward plan, but if it's not already there, because I've committed to bringing back the domestic abuse strategy, can we make sure that it's actually added in there with a date to be decided? Thank you.
Yes, great, absolutely, we will do that, Councillor Haynes, and appreciate what you said about bringing that forward as quickly as is possible. Appreciating it's driven often by partner agencies in that paper. Okay, thank you. Any other comments we have in relation to the forward plan? Okay, then we just note that. It just leaves me to say, well, thank you ever so much, everybody, for your members of the committee, the public who've been watching, members of the wider council who've engaged today. I think it's been a really useful meeting. Last thing I can say is wish everybody a really healthy and happy Christmas. It's going to be a slightly different Christmas than we're all used to, but at least there is hope for us going forward into next year, into 2021. So thank you all for your efforts and your input, and look forward to seeing you very soon. Thank you very much. I'll close the meeting.